Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be with you in a moment with Talking Shhh IT with Tony and Glenn. I hope you all have enjoyed all of the weekly shows on Angify. If you haven't heard about our shows, please go ahead, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Send me a link so I can follow you as well, so I can share the love with your YouTube. I go ahead and we have shows every night, Monday through Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Tomorrow night we have F is for Friday, so I want fun, fantastic, fucking righteous, fort, and any other song that you can think of that can begin with a F or be classified with an F. Then we move on, and for a great weekend, we come back to you with hashtag Metal Mondays in the sewer with Jigga Joe. And then Tuesdays, we have 2 for 2 on the tube. Wednesdays, we have Whip It Out Wednesday. Thursday, you're talking, you dad me at hello, then Talking Shhh IT with Tony and Glenn. And then we're back again. So, tomorrow night we should have a guest. Nash should be joining us at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night at 9. Thanks again for tuning in to Angify and enjoy the love and share the love all around. We'll be right with you.
And now we got Tony.
And we are here tonight on Angify with Talking Shhh IT with Tony and Glenn. Take it away, guys.
Oh, the emptying the tire effect.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Hey, Glenn.
I see we got Greg over there. We're running around over here.
Oh yeah, Greg's making me dizzy.
I'm making myself dizzy.
We're mobile.
Yeah, for now we're mobile. Sorry guys, until I get back to the house I can play. I'm joining in mobile.
Well, you've got some new stuff to play with. Hey, you set up last night. You've got to be like itching to dig in there and play around with some of those new toys.
Oh, more than you
Wait
know.
till I show you the guitar. Wait till I show you the guitar amps and things that you can run that bass through.
Oh, goody. I want to know. I really do, because I'm really curious. I need to up my game here a little bit.
Just by putting Cakewalk on, you upped it right there. You're going to open up a
now
lot of new possibilities.
To those 8 tracks. It's kind of nice. I'm kind of curious at the things I'll be able to do with it. So
you can beat my record. I've got has 100 at this point. So if you can make a project with more, I really want to see how far somebody can take their machine.
You've stretched it to over 100, you said?
142 on mine.
142.
Oh. Yeah, I missed that empty. 142 tracks.
Yeah, I mean, 120 of them are wave tracks, and the rest are MIDI tracks. MIDI's a little easier on the computer because it doesn't have to do as much work to play a synthesizer. But like 120 of them are wave tracks playing together No burping.
Nice.
Nice. Very nice.
And a
Most
lot of that is
situations.
probably because I don't overload it. You know, I was telling you last night, I don't tend to put effects on each track, which will overload a project. But using buses, one
Right.
reverb on 120 tracks, just one reverb. I get around some of that.
Yeah, it would definitely be a lot more resources to try to use 120 different reverbs as opposed to one
Yeah.
reverb where you're sending 120 tracks, a little bit of this and that. You're breaking up a little
Yeah.
bit in the middle
Yeah,
there.
and it be a lot of noise too. When reverbs bounce against each other, they create noise.
Yep. This keeps them more synchronized and more keep them working together. One of the actual videos that I had lined up for tonight is about using Cakewalk in band, using routing, sends, and buses, and just the theory about keeping all that together. And it's definitely helpful, especially for people who are just starting out, but also has some other good stuff in it as well. It's also by
Yeah,
Creative Sauce on YouTube. We've checked out a
yeah,
number of
and
his
Mike,
videos.
right?
Yeah, Mike from Creative
That's
Sauce.
Mike, Awesome Sauce. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This guy is must subscribe if you are getting into Cakewalk. He will get you started fantastic with his introductory videos.
I heard that. You guys had mentioned that before. I actually just subscribed to his channel, so we'll be checking out some videos by him too.
Yeah, and this one that we're going to be watching really emphasizes the bus mixing approach. So great for you to learn this actually starting off on Cakewalk. You'll actually be taking the right approach right from the beginning. You won't have to go through the pain of learning what you can overload like I did for the first 7 months before I started using these techniques. I could have killed my computer back then.
Right. And my computer, it's with the recording I'm doing now, it's nothing huge. You know, it's I play bass, I track 2 bass tracks, a dirty channel, clean channel, and you know, I've only been able to run, like I'd mentioned, only up to 8 tracks on Ableton right now. I'm only running a light version, so my tracks are simple, but my computer, even with those tracks, are starting to crack out, and you know, I can't
Well, your
push
biggest
too much.
obstacle is the i3, your processor. You're good with the
Yeah,
RAM. 8 gigs is a good starting point. The i3 is just a smidge below the process. Even an i5 is borderline. i7s are awesome.
and
Nowadays,
that's
if
we're
you're
talking
buying a computer,
internal.
don't get less than an i7 because the price is almost identical to an i5, but an i7 is a world of difference in audio processing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I've bought laptops for people over the last year, singers who basically were trying to migrate from the phone, and they wanted to get good Scarlett mic combinations, and
Right.
$300 to $400 is the price point on every laptop that I've gotten for someone. One, she managed to get 16 gigs of RAM plus an i7, a decent i7, only a couple years old. Um, $425 for the machine,
Very
which is a
nice.
great deal. That machine is going to do music for her for years to come
We're
with
gonna have
16
to
gigs of
talk.
RAM, no less.
We were talking about upgrading me and giving my son the one I'm running now, my
There you
setup,
go.
and upgrading mine. So
That's a good
we'll have to
evolution.
talk.
I'm sure he'll eventually use up that i3 too, but it's a great starting point for him if he's playing the guitar and getting the stuff himself. It will do the
Exactly.
job.
And I think the track that you guys heard, he double tracked, so one lead channel, 2 bass channels. I think he ran the 7 channels on it, and it
Yeah,
came
and
out smooth.
those guitarists will make tracks. I mean, today's guitarists are so much more creative. They'll couple of rhythm tracks, couple of synchronized lead tracks. They'll hard pan them. You know, a guitarist builds up tracks like a keyboardist these days.
Like no other anymore.
Mm. Yeah, in the old days, when you had to do it to tape, like you'd have maybe 2, 3 guitar tracks because tape's
Right.
expensive.
Yeah.
And you might hard pan them and use up 2 tracks on the tape, but if you only had an 8
But
track, you really couldn't afford 2 tracks sometimes to do that. We were a little
it's a
spoiled with
different
digital these
sound if you
days.
do it that way, you know. So it was price and that. Nowadays, it's just a matter of clicking a button and pulling it in. So it's just kind of preference and
Duplicate,
what you can
push
do
them.
as far as your processor and stuff will let you.
Well, you certainly should be able to get more tracks than you've ever gotten out of Ableton. Even with the i3, I'd say 30, 40 tracks, you might start to hit a glitchy ceiling.
And I'm way under that one. So we'll
At the
talk
moment.
later when I hit
At
that
the
ceiling.
moment. I bet you, as you start to like see what you can do, you'll be surprised how the tracks can add up. I'm sure you will start to, especially with your sound technique with your bass. You're
Right.
already setting up 2 tracks when you start because you're looking for that synchronized dual bass sound. So
Yeah.
eventually, I could see you actually doing like 4 synchronized basses just to get the patch that you want.
I thought about that last night actually, and then I was messing around with the last track that I'm running through Ableton before I left the house. Actually, I was trying to tie it up and started getting different sounds as I was panning different directions, and I've got 4 different guitar tracks on it. You guys will hear it here shortly, but it sounds really good, and I'll synchronize to kind of articulate it. But it's 4 guitar tracks, 2 bass tracks, you know. Uh, and I just started messing with the panning on them and the way different sounds I was getting out of them. So yeah, I can only imagine how many different guitar tracks I could run and pan them different directions and different
Oh,
percentages. And, oh
wait till
man,
you fire up the TH3. When you fire up the TH3 and Cakewalk and you get all these killer guitar amps, believe me, they're as useful for the bass as they are on the guitar. I started using it actually for my bass tracks. Then I was like, wow, these really like pump up a bass sound.
and that's funny to me because I'm the guy that used to plug and play, and so it was extremely awkward to find out that people were putting these different patches on them, these different VSTs and VST3s, you know. So
Yeah,
it's all
actually
new to me. I'm
running
just figuring it
running
out.
all their effects nowadays are being done, post on the PC. I mean, there's still a lot of guitarists are using those pods, and some of the other hardware effects still. Those are still popular, but there's an advantage to running your effects post like that, especially if you don't need to have them while you're playing. If you can record your track nice and clean, get the clean recording. Post effects processing is way more versatile. You can say, oh,
So
I guess I
Todd,
want
you're
more
talking
distortion. You can change it. You can change it all after the fact and post
right, and I've
effects.
realized that. I thought about
Comfortable.
doing my next one and without the effects, as you had actually mentioned last night, running mine. I thought about it, just playing my bass to a drum track without any of the effects, running a guitar line through it without any of the effects, running the lead line through it without any effects. Throw on the usual that I do and see what it sounds like.
Well, look at that beautiful waveform, that you're getting. The waveform we were seeing last night with just the clean signal looked fantastic. That's
It's
Oh, and it's
exactly what
extremely clean.
a bass should look like, a nice, solid, in the middle waveform with just the
Laser
little
beam
peaks
of
when you're,
audio.
yeah. When you're hitting the high note or something, and when you're looking at the wave, you never hit the ceiling and
A
you never hit the
prominent note.
floor, and the
Yeah.
middle is all nice and fat. That's a great clean bass sound. From there,
And I try to
everything that
be
you
as
had
consistent
post,
as I can.
yeah, and the post effects are always going to sound better when they have a starting clean signal like that. It's
Sorry, guys,
it's
it's hot
garbage in,
here.
garbage out rule.
the other real trick is the attack that you're using when you're playing. Like if you're using the same attack that you would be using when you had all the effects on, because that's what you're looking for,
Yes,
looking to hear when you're playing with
very
when
good
you're playing
point.
with the attack and you're getting all that effect at the moment. Like as long as you're playing the same way without the effects, then when you add the effects later, it'll still sound the same way to you.
And I didn't even think about that
Yes.
until it was mentioned last night. So that's why I had thought about doing my next one, running my first one on Cakewalk, running the very first track from scratch. Me, pulling all my good old GGD, get good drum kit in and from Contact, and all my parallax, and there's some others that I run through Neural DSP that have been amazing for me, and running a track through it and seeing it how it all sounds. But now I'm itching to
And
do it.
I,
I'm not home.
I would recommend I would recommend as you're doing your testing, now that you got Cakewalk set up, try recording a bass track on Ableton and try to do an exact duplicate, same settings over on Cakewalk, and look at whether the DAWs are actually getting different signals. They should be consistent. They should get the same thing from the Focusrite, assuming all things are created equal. It's
Well, and
possible
I had
though
done
that
that.
you might see a difference. One might have hotter signals than the other. If you go to BandLab and use the online editor, me and Glenn were talking about this the other night, you get hot signals. Cakewalk is a little cooler on the input.
Well, and I had tested the theory about that, running it through, as you know, I run through Ableton. And I tested that theory last night as we did setting up Cakewalk so I could do this track tonight. And the waveforms between those two are extremely consistent between the two, almost identical wave patterns.
And how did it sound? Did it sound
They
consistent?
both sound consistent and very clean. So
Yeah,
as
which is
far as
good.
input audio, I'm
It
getting
says
great
your
input through my
Focusrite is
Scarlett.
your Focusrite is nice and calibrated, and that's a good sign when DAWs
And that's me.
do
I took the
record the
time
same
to
signal.
actually adjust my game. Like I didn't actually record anything or put anything out until I had made sure that I was getting a great input signal, because that much I had done the research on. As long as I'm getting a good input signal, then whatever I'm putting through past it is always adjustable and
Yes.
changeable within reason to a certain point, blah blah blah. But you have that
Well,
good, nice, clean
that's why
waveform
I was
coming.
suggesting, like, you're going to have a volume on the instrument, you're going to have a volume on the audio interface, you're going to have a
Right.
volume inside the DAW. So every one of those, if they're all maxed out, you no longer have any place to go if you do need to push. So if you
The
can
only
get
thing that
50
I
to
maxed out,
75% across each thing, if each thing is 50 to 75%, it's in that range, you got
right?
room to push and you got room to pull back. And usually on the audio equipment like the Focusrite, 50, 60% on the input is a sweet spot for it.
See,
At
now
least with
my
all the
sweet
mics that I've
spot,
calibrated, might be a little different
my
for a
sweet,
bass though.
it is a little bit, not too terribly much. You said what, 40 to 60?
Yeah, well, 50 to 60, usually
50 to
somewhere's in the
60.
middle on the Focusrites is a great starting point. You only want to push
So
it
with
if
the bass,
you need some boost.
as I did mine, so my setup as far as the volume goes, my setups are the only thing that I've maxed out that I potentially in theory haven't maxed out, because I run an Ibanez, the GS 205 5-string. It's all completely standard stock, original pickups, blah blah blah. But I have a neck volume, a neck pickup volume knob. I have a bridge pickup volume knob. I have a
Oh,
tone
you have
knob, the blend
multiple.
knob, and then I have a EQ knob. And so, in order to get the tone that I wanted, um, inspired by another artist on BandLab, he suggested running a program that I run. I showed you Parallax, but
Oh, you got Parallax?
in order,
Yeah.
yeah, I run it through Parallax. And so I max out both volume knobs on my bass, both bridge and neck. Sometimes with some of the songs, I backed off on the neck pickup to give me the tone that I wanted. It gives me more of a sharp punch because I'm more of a hammer
So when you're
style. I don't
adjusting
enter.
those, is obviously it's affecting the volume because it's giving more of a particular effect. Or is it
Yeah.
really like its own volume for that part of the sound?
It's so each knob is only controls the volume for that pickup. That's it.
For that pickup.
Yep.
That's
And then
pretty
I
cool
have the
though.
tone blend knob, but then the fourth knob is
You're
a smaller
basically
knob.
like synthesizing. You're basically synthesizing your bass sound from the
Yep.
different pickups. That's
Yes,
cool.
I took the time to do that a little bit. It took me a little bit to figure that out. I didn't, in my head, for some reason, didn't realize that if I have both of them up all the way, but if I back off on one a little bit, 25% maybe, which is usually the case on my neck pickup, it gives me a slightly higher in volume and a sharper pitch, like for my
It
punch every
adjusts the
time,
tone.
because I
Yeah.
pluck, I don't
See, now,
pick.
in those situations, I wouldn't say like there's a perfect thing or 100 or is bad. In those situations, because you're using these in a way to shape your sound, if you have to go to 100 to get the tone that you want, that's not a bad thing. I'm assuming
Well,
there's
and the
a
cool thing
master
about
volume,
Ibanez,
right? The
it's
Ibanez
not a
has a
master volume
master.
actually.
Yeah, so
The
that's
fourth,
the one
it's an
that you don't want
EQ.
to push all the way.
It's an EQ. It's actually kind of it's a tone boost basically. More of the low end, it pushes my low end more if I want. My bass, the bass that you hear coming out of that, the depthness of it is only coming from the parallax. I haven't boosted my low end on my bass for my pre EQ, which runs off the 9 volt at all. It's always on 0. I have ran a couple of songs on about 25-30%, but that knob is usually all the way down. So that knob gives me all the freedom in the world to change my tone as far as like live tone instantly on the spot, no matter where those volume knobs are.
Now, is that more of an exclusive thing to Ibanez's? Because
As
I'm
far
not
as I know
familiar
right
with
now,
basses, but that
yes,
kind of
right now
multi-pickup technique, is that an
it's
Ibanez
their
thing?
yeah, it's kind of their pitch on not being able to afford active pickups, what I'm really upset about right now, because I figured out that
Well,
that's the sound that I want. That's where it comes
we had a
from.
discussion
Is
on that last night too.
Yep.
Glenn helped me
exactly.
to understand. Help me to understand,
Yes.
like, what is the difference?
Yeah.
It basically, the active pickups is basically a preamp before the signal leaves the bass.
And with the 5 string I have here, it's just the 3 knobs. So I just have the 2 different volume controls, the one for each of the 2 pickups and the 1 tone control. So like there's no master volume besides those. It's just, the one is the how much you want from the neck pickup, one is how much you want from the other pickup, and the other is the tone. So it's just the
And
three
how do
three
you
dials.
adjust yours, Glenn? Are
Again,
yours like
we were
pushed
talking.
up?
I usually go 100% all the way, and if I want to make
You go
adjustments to
100?
my tone, I go from the pedal that I have, the DI box, because I have that Tech
Oh, so
Sansamp
you
DI
do it
box.
post signal. You do it
Essentially,
post
yeah.
signal then. Yeah.
But for the most part, most of what
So
you hear recorded is just the bass itself at 100% going through the Mackie, and then no effects really on it, unless I just put
Just
a little bit of
pumping
compression.
it out.
Yep.
Pumping
now
it out at 100.
personally, I know why I do it, and I think it's the reason that most bassists that I've watched do videos do it. It's if I pump it all the way up to 100, it's the quickest and easiest way to turn the signal off completely from my bass. I just crank the knobs all the way down because I know they're going all the way back up. I don't have any adjustments there. It's just on, off.
It's not hard to find the
On,
sweet
off.
spot. Yeah, it's easy. Crank them all the way on, and then you're good, and then all the way
Exactly.
off, and you're muted, and you put it back away. Yeah.
So that why you do it too?
That is part of it. Like that's why I got into the habit of doing it. But I've also admittedly never really looked deeply into my bass tone, which I really should. But for the most part, when I would be playing live, I would basically be playing through that Sansamp DI box. So I have settings on there that I like, and I like the way it sounds. And, people always say that they like the tone. But when I'm playing and recording, I'm usually just doing the bass itself through the Mackie board, because the preamps on the Mackie board really do give so much nice tone to it. So just the instrument itself, and that I don't want to try to add a bunch of stuff on top that can take away from the natural tone. So I just try to amplify the actual natural tone of it.
And
Yeah,
that's
those
a good
Mackies
theory.
are
I can agree with that.
worth every penny.
Yeah, and it's a tiny
and
Mackie. I mean, the one I'm using is just a 4-channel, so it's just a tiny little 4-channel Mackie that I've had for a decade or more.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and they last forever. You know,
Yep.
the ones from the 90s, even the analog ones from the 90s, I would still take one today just for their mic preamps, if nothing else.
And it feels solid as a tank too. That's the other thing is it doesn't.
Yes.
It's not some little flimsy plastic thing. It's like a solid metal chunk that's just boom, it's there. And you plug into
That's
it.
why
You
I
know it's
went with
there.
that. When
A
I was
good old
deciding back in
fashioned
February
solid made fucking
between the Zoom,
box.
Yep.
I was deciding between the Zoom and the Mackie, and it was the durability that eventually, and a couple of extra functions, but that durability is super important to me.
Yep.
Those Zooms are nice, but they look like I could break them.
Yeah, it depends on which ones too. Like the Zoom that I was using was the Zoom recorder, so it's the Zoom H6. So it has the ability you can plug in 4 XLRs to the sides and use the built-in mics as well. So I can record a live gig and plug 4 things into it. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you can use it. But even with
And
that,
that one's really, that one you have is really designed for portability. So it is more rugged than their desktop mixers.
Yeah,
The one I was looking at was like the one Joe has, where it's got great features. You can literally record on each track independently into Cakewalk, which is awesome.
Wow.
It's a
Yep.
multi-track digital interface, and it's not that much more expensive. The other reason why I didn't go with it is because what I got for 225, I was trying to solve a bunch of problems. So the Mackie solved some of it, and rather than go with the Zoom, I used the extra money that I saved to deal with some wires and mics and other things, headset.
Yeah, because with the Zoom that I have, it's got it also has the ability to go multi-channel into Cakewalk, I assume, or wherever you want to go to it. Really.
Yeah.
Because I can just
All
plug
the
it in
Zooms,
USB and I can plug in all on the side. Every channel would go in independently.
all the Zooms can record independently on
Yeah.
each channel. It's
Now,
the
is
best
this an
feature of it.
independent sound card?
It acts as an independent.
It's a USB sound card, but
Like a Scarlett?
yeah, but unlike
Okay.
the Scarlett, all the channels in the mixer can be activated. When you go into Cakewalk, you know how you see like you have a choice for input 1, input 2, input 3, or input 4? When
Right.
you have the Zooms, you can set up 8 tracks, and if it's an 8-channel mixer, and set up 8 independent inputs from that Zoom, and Cakewalk can record each one of those channels individually. It's great for live recording. If I was doing club recordings and things like that, I would have gone with the Zoom.
Yep.
That's crazy. I haven't heard of that. I am also pretty new to all this. Just started learning about it since last November. So I know some of these things, and I know a lot of what revolves around my tone. But
a lot of these features with like multi-channel recording are newer in the last couple of years. In the old days, a USB interface basically would give you like a stereo into the computer. So everything in the mixer, if it was a 16-channel mixer, would still be left-right stereo into the USB. These multi-channel USB mixers is something you've seen as USB 3 came out, and USB got faster. Now this hardware is more possible these days, and that if you're shopping for a USB audio device these days, especially if you're going to do like recording where you might want to do vocals and guitar and do them at the same time, that's the feature to look for, because the price is not much different, about $100 difference from the Mackie that I got to the Zoom.
Really? I'm gonna have to look at that. Yeah, I'll check that out, because I was looking at potentially upgrading here shortly, and like I said, handing down my stuff. to my
Your
son.
kid's gonna get a lot of inheritance, huh? Your kid's
Yeah.
gonna be getting a lot of
Like, you don't even
hand me
know.
downs, but cool hand me downs.
But yeah, it'll do what he needs. Like, he's at the starting. Hopefully he doesn't like surpass me. Well, no. Hopefully he surpasses me quickly, but it'll do
will.
what he needs it to do at the time, and when he needs an upgrade, we'll do what we can to upgrade him then. It is what it is. It'll
Yeah.
do what it needs
It's a
to.
good start. With
Yeah.
what you're starting with, that's a good start for him.
Yeah, it's done me really well. It really has. I've had a lot of people, ask me about my tone. I'm a little reluctant to give up my exact stuff,
Shit,
but
it
I'm
was the
not. I'm
first
all
thing I
about.
thought. when Ange played your track the other night, like the first thing I was thinking was like, holy crap, that bass sounds incredible. I mean, you were doing it on top of some kick-ass guitar. Like Ice's guitar always grabs my attention, but
Oh
the whole
yeah, he
time I
does
was
some
listening to it, I was
amazing
like, this
stuff.
bass is incredible sounding. I
Yeah,
think
I
I
love it.
even asked in the chat at that point. I was like, what's going on here with the bass?
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's done me some amazing things. My main tone shape comes around parallax. Neural DSP, they've done me really well.
Yeah, I've got them bookmarked over there. I'm going to test them out on my other music machine.
And they're great. They give you a 14-day free trial on everything that they come out with. They just came out with a new Tim Henson archetype, you know, VST plugin. They always give you a bunch of, you know, pedals and head units, 3 different head units with each one, and different, you know, foot pedals you can use,
I want to
preamps.
talk to Samuel about that quad that I saw on their
Quad
page.
Cortex. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want one. It's
Oh,
amazing. You
I
can
do
run
too, and I don't even
separate
play bass.
things, and it's great. No, it's shaped around everything. It
Yeah.
literally has several different plugins, you know, run simultaneous: guitar, bass, lead, rhythm. You know, it seems to be a great machine. I'm gonna look at getting one. They're just pricey.
It's a nice hardware solution. You know, you're going to find that like you can do a lot with the computer now, and you can run your effects post and do all that stuff over there. But these
Right.
hardware solutions that integrate and give you um, they give you some of the processing in a box, so that way, like, you know, if you are playing on stage and nobody wants to lug a laptop on stage, those
Right.
are the solutions to integrate all that cool stuff there, because you can offload those in the boxes. They work nice with the computer when they are with the computer, and when they're not, you got a standalone piece of equipment that's useful.
And it's
It's like those
supposed to
pods.
be. It's all damn near like running a computer. You just don't have all the extra
Yeah,
crap. It's
it
just
is a
you run
computer.
different
Yeah,
signal chains, and
it's
it's a
just a
phenomenal
computer
device.
that's built proprietary to do just what it does. You know, you're not dealing
Exactly.
with the Windows operating system and all the other crap, and that's the unreliable stuff. I wouldn't want to have to depend on a computer on stage because Windows is unreliable, and you want your
It can
music
be,
equipment
yeah.
be like flawless. You don't want it
Yeah.
crashing and blue screening.
So things like this Quad Cortex that have come out have, you know, really piqued my interest. I know they've been around for well longer than I've been in pursuit of all this stuff, but I find it really interesting to be able to take, you know, 10 by 12-inch square and make it this amazing, you know, standalone unit that can take input signal from a guitar and just
And it's got like
completely, you
5
know,
stomp boxes. I mean, you can stomp, stomp, stomp like 5 times and have 5 different
and
setups.
each one of those has its own signal chain that you can run several different VST plugins through that are based around Neural DSP, or you can, from what I understand, import, you know, your
You
own
can
setups
basically
and stuff
set
like
up
that.
your whole set list for the night. You know, you can
Exactly.
have like 5 killer different sound effects that you're using on your guitar, ready to switch between. Clean, crunchy,
Oh yeah, instantly. Just, you know, and as long as it takes you to step your foot down, you know, and you got an instant change
and
in how
you don't
everything
need a
sounds.
strip. You don't need a strip of stomp boxes like in the old days, because a
No,
lot of my
no, just
guitarists and my
one.
bassists
Boom.
that I played with, they had bars of stomp boxes. Now it's gotten
I've
so much cleaner.
seen, yeah, I've actually talked to some, well, I've been around the music industry for a little while. I drove tour bus for a little bit, you know, I've done some stage work and sound work a little bit. And I've seen long, you know, those big stomp pads where they've got, you know, 25 different pedals on the stupid thing, and you know, your pedal
Yeah,
board out there and they're
you get like
stomping
the
all these
Roland
different
bar.
ones.
Yeah, Roland had like
Yeah.
that bar that you could just like put like 10 of them in, and
Yep. Yeah, I've actually talked to them, and they're, some of them have been unaware of like the VST things that have been going on. I'm like, yeah, well, this is what I've researched, and they're like, oh, well, this is how it's usually done. So it's been nice
well,
talking to different
it's
musicians.
funny. Guitarists, when it comes to that, sometimes they're the slowest to assimilate to the VSTs and things like that. Because my old school guitarist that I used to jam with, I don't think he'll ever give up his stomp boxes. He's
They're also
probably still
very-
Yeah.
playing with the ones from the 90s because he loved his sound so much that, you get a certain sound, you don't want to get rid of it.
And I was just gonna say, that was been my biggest thing was my tone. I didn't want to do anything unless I loved my tone. And once I hit that spot, man, I was like, yeah, even if I've got to make adjustments here and there, which I still do, but I love the bass of my sound. It sounds amazing.
With some of you
And I
need to
think
really
that's
show
the same
them.
as each musician, and they have to love their sound before they go out with anything. And it's just a little bit harder for guitarists. They've got more tones they have to deal with and peaks and chords and shit like that. That's why I'm having such a hard time writing my own shit. It's too much for me.
Well, you approach the bass a lot like a guitar when it comes to your tone. I would think you're a guitarist with your attitude about it. A lot of bassists, they find a bass they like, they plug it in, and they just run, but they don't tend to sculpt their tone as much as attention you've put into it.
The style of
And
music
I've
depends
showed
too.
you
Yeah.
a little bit of it
Yeah,
last night.
style definitely dictates that.
Yes, it does a little bit. I've been able to recently put out a hip hop track for Goop, and that parallax, it helped, bend everything. I turned off, I basically kept my rock setup for that. I just toned down some of my mid and high distortion, my drive settings that I was showing you last night to
Mhm.
clean up, and it was more just a pop.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, the heavier
and for
stuff
the hip
requires a
hop,
heavier tone.
that's what you want. You want
Yeah.
a more bassy tone on the hip hop.
Right.
Make it go boom.
So it is, and I love my sound. I think that's how all us musicians basically are. Is we all want to sculpt it in our own different ways, and once we find that way, whether it be stomp box or VST, it's kind of like, okay, I found it. Now I'm kind of worried about jumping off of it, or hell no, I found it. You can't make me leave it.
I could
Yeah,
see them
see-
making a case for having they're so adjusted to using the stomp boxes themselves, being able to make small adjustments on the fly and knowing you need a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that,
Yeah,
and knowing that you can jump to
exactly.
it easily on the actual stomp box. That's one thing. The other thing
Yes,
is they're so
that is
invested
an
in it where
advantage.
they've gone out and individually curated and picked each of these, over the years. They put them all together and made them into this collection. And then you're telling them you can replace it all with this software, and they look at this box that, each of those pedals tells a story of when they got it, how they got it, what it added to their sound, all that stuff. And
Exactly.
you're telling them they can replace it with this little box, with this software that you can just update and add all kinds of stuff in. So I think it's also that
Just
level of
crush
attachment.
their past.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
That could be part of the attachment to
But
the past thing.
it's also things like the quad cortex that have come out that have kind of combined the best of both worlds, because you take that quad cortex and you plug it into the computer, you define your sound as you would on, with those knobs, and plug it into that quad cortex, into each one of those stomps that you were talking about, each different channel on each different setting, get it all set up. And that's all you got to do. You got one pedal that turns it, or you stomp it, and it defines what you want.
You
I
can
think it's
You're
you
streamlining
can
it.
design it.
neurofeedback.
Yeah, you can design it all on the PC and then offload it into the box, and boom. Now you
Yep.
have a new stomp box because you just moved from the PC. That Digitech, odds, these are the kinds of companies that have brought all that signal processing into the new stomp boxes over the last 15, 20 years, and it's really come to a cool place now. Those thousands of dollars that you
What
spent
I've
20
seen.
years ago to buy each one of those stomp boxes is so
Right.
much cheaper now.
Yep. It is in an aspect,
And they
and then
do
it can
everything
be
in the
3
kitchen
times
sink.
more in the other.
And then there's the things like
No,
the
it's all,
TH3 that they
it's
just
also
give
more
you.
complicated. It's also more
Exactly. More
complicated. So
learning, more
some
knowledge
guitarists,
to it.
like Glenn was saying, if you are happy with the knobs that you've gotten used to and the sound that you get, it can be intimidating to say, wow, it would be cool to have all those stomp boxes, but what am I going to have to learn to get it set up?
That's where I like things like with the TH3, you can just, the presets, you can just jump in and say, just throw this down and throw that down and see what they sound like together and play with them and try them out. And, you're basically being able to
And
audition all the sounds.
what's cool with the TH3 is you see are used to those old stomp boxes. The TH3 shows you a graphical representation of the stomp box. So you
Now,
are
which is
still
the
looking at it.
TH3?
You're just turning the knobs on the screen.
It's the one that's
The
built in.
TH3 is a guitar plugin that comes with Cakewalk. You are definitely
Built
going
into
to
Cakewalk.
be playing around with that.
Yep.
I use it in every project.
You're going to love
It
it.
serves multiple purposes.
Cool.
It's not just a guitar amp. I mean, it is a guitar amp. It's great at what it does, but it's actually useful for a lot of things.
And the more I've talked to people about this, the theory behind using something like that, shaped with the things that I already use, at the end of the chain, in theory, in my head, will basically be the preamp that I'm looking for that would be built into my bass, just at the end of my chain, and give me the punch that I'm looking for. So hopefully, come on, Cakewalk, do me some
Yeah,
good.
you might find some of that punch with some of the TH3 presets. I'll show you where the best ones are hiding. There's like 5 or 6 of them that once you hear them, you'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna be using this a lot.
There's also the question of if you want that boost at the end of your signal chain, or if you really want it at the beginning of the signal chain. If you're trying to get the whole signal boosted, or if you just want to give more power to what the output was coming out. There's a big difference
Yeah,
depending on how much
very
effect
good
you're putting
point.
onto
True.
things. It could even be somewhere in the
And
middle
I
that you want.
started thinking as you started saying that. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize that. It took me a It took me a little while to realize that in that signal chain that you're building, like right now I have Ableton, so each track, I'm in that track at the bottom, I build my signal chain, usually comprised of a compressor, slight EQ adjustment, and my parallax. And
The parallax goes at the end.
yeah, and that's how
Yeah.
tuner. I always run a tuner first so I can see what I'm playing. Still learning the music theory stuff, so
It's
it
smart to
helps
run that first.
match the tone.
If you run that tuner at the end of the chain, it might not be seeing the same thing it sees at the beginning, because if all that effects can
Getting
actually
that cleanest signal,
change
yeah.
your tune. Yeah, you're not.
And I thought about that. That's why I stuck that at the beginning of the chain. I use a tuner at every beginning chain that I use, whether it be guitar, keyboard, whatever. So I know what I'm playing, but I also know that I'm getting what I want to be playing at the beginning of my, at the very beginning signal coming into that chain. But yeah, I didn't think about that whole positioning until recently, and I started lining them up that way for a reason, because I wanted each one specifically to do what I wanted it to do in that position on that chain to get the sound that I was looking for.
And that's the key, is knowing what you want, because whether you run EQ at the beginning of the chain or at the end of the chain is the difference of what are you trying to do. Are you
It really makes a
trying to
difference. It
EQ
really
out
does. A
the
lot
to
of
be
people need to
processed,
know that.
or are you trying to EQ out the excess noise that the effects are doing? An EQ can be useful on either side, or maybe even both sides. You might do certain things going in and other things to clean up going out. So an EQ is something that can really fit anywhere, depending on your purpose. Things
Yeah, and
like
I've realized that
noise
recently.
reduction, pop filters, those kinds of things are really the candidates to put at the top. Like, get rid of the noise at the beginning of the signal. That way you're not processing noise.
So, for instance, a perfect example of that, the reason that I run the signal chain that I run, the reason I do it the way I do it now, tuner, EQ, compressor, then my parallax. I do it that way because
and that's a good order.
The new set,
you could flip the parallax and the compressor. Depending on how the parallax responds to the compression,
it has its own
you might want to experiment on both sides. So what are you using the compressor for then, on top of the parallax? Are you massaging the signal before parallax does its thing?
Basically, I'm letting parallax massage the signal after the fact. I'm cleaning my signal before it goes into my, basically parallax is a distortion VST. It just has a nice advantage of being it built in compressor and separate from your mid and high channels, where you can drive those channels separately and compress your low end.
So you're kind of like boosting back up anything that the pre-compressor might have toned down.
Basically,
The
in
parallax
an
is
essence, yeah.
kind of giving it back the punch.
Yeah,
I see.
in an essence, that's kind of how I use it. But the EQ at the beginning of it is that the new set of strings that I put on my bass, it has the tone I was looking for and my style, and not having active pickups. I was mentioned these, still strings, and so it's given me kind of a more of a mid end and high frequency fucking kind of click. A weird kind of just random ass
Yeah.
noise that you can hear if I turn it off. But I use it to filter that.
Well, that's where you're getting
string
that
noise
picky
out.
sound.
Yes,
That's where you get
I
your
shape it.
picky
There is a
punch and-
couple. I have about a 750 hertz, a 2200 hertz, and about 1025-ish hertz. Those three areas I have spikes from the string tone on the bass itself that the pickup is picking.
Right. I saw those in that EQ cut that you had.
Yeah, you mentioned that last night. So that's what those are for. But the advantage of
Yeah,
using
it's
that,
great visualizations.
Yep.
We were
Fab
literally
filter.
seeing your sound. We
yeah,
couldn't hear
Fab filter,
it, but
they've
we
been
could
great.
see it doing.
And they, a lot of the GGD guys, Misha Mansour over at GGD and Noli Get Good. He's the sound that I was basically looking for. I came across Noli.
Yeah, that's the EQ. You added that yourself, right?
Yes, I did. I
Fab filter
actually
didn't
had
come
come
with
across that.
Ableton.
No. I got that on my own because I had seen that through one of their songwriting videos that I had been watching, and I'm like, I really wonder, because it has a notch option on it where you can filter out. You can basically get down to, if you know exactly what hertz you want to cut out, which I had to find, and they have a good way of doing that. But you can notch out that specific signal rather than belling that signal, rather than having a bell on it. You can actually straight cut that out and keep everything around it. That's why I have three, because I have three spikes in my signal that I get from my string.
So you like black hole that little spot.
Basically, yeah, they let you just completely cut it out. They have a gain, and then they have, on the gain knob around the outside edge of the knob is a EQ2 knob. It's like a background, from what I can hear using it, and it's been amazing actually. I suggest it, but it takes almost the background noise, and you can either boost it or you can completely like cut it out and keep the foreground clean signal. It's crazy to use. It's been awesome with my bass, but I think everybody should check it out. Fab Filter Q3, and they have a C2 compressor that's been pretty cool to use so far too. Pretty useful.
Nice.
Yeah, a lot of these guys usually don't just do EQ. They tend to do EQ and compressor. All those plug-in companies. Those are two areas of the market that you got a lot of cool programs being made these days.
So basically, both my chains run the same. I use the same exact setup on both chains. I just use the parallax at the end to distort my mid and high frequencies depending on how clean or how dirty I want my sound to come out. On my clean side, the parallax literally just basically kind of keeps my mids and highs at a regular incoming frequency. I do EQ through the parallax on both sides a little bit differently, but basically the same, to shape the tone in kind of a harmonic signal.
Nice. One thing about the compressors too is by using a compressor and then going into the parallax and having it be its own compressor, is running compressors one after the other can be a lot smoother than just doing, like, if you wanted to cue a 6 dB cut from compression, for example, rather than just doing one compressor cutting 6 dB. If you do two compressors one after the other, each one cutting about 3, you get a much more gentle way of getting the signal down. It sounds much more natural by doing it that way instead of just with one harsh compression.
Yeah, compressing my signal going in before the parallax is to, like I said, basically clean my signal. I don't boost anything. I don't flatten anything. Basically, I just compress it to bring up what's low, take down what's high, and clean my signal. And then once it hits the parallax, I either use the parallax on my clean side to tighten up my sound, give it more of that pop that I'm looking for, or I loosen up on it to let it flow a little bit more. On my dirty side, I usually keep that pretty compressed, 80%, 75%. And then I distort my mid and high frequencies there with a little bit of compression.
Now, you did say that the two channels, though, you're usually just doing the one take, for example, the one bass track or the one run through where it's going to both channels. So it's not a different attack on one channel versus the other. So it's going to be the exact same finger attack on both.
The first compressor running into the parallax they are set differently. I do, like I said, that one I tighten up on it. I compress it a little bit more, whereas my dirty one I loosen up on it as well, and then let it release a little bit slower on that side, so I can stretch out my distortion.
Nice. And you pretty much use that same signal chain for any of your things. You'll tweak little things here and there, but it's not a huge difference between one thing to the next.
No, my Ibanez, man, it's a beast. It's been a monster of a machine. Ibanez has been great to me, man. And so that is my main signal for everything. That's my main chain. And as you said, I make little adjustments, and it's usually to just mid and high drives and a little bit of the high frequency to catch a little bit more of that picking sound that I'm looking for.
Right.
But other than that, it's the same chain I use exactly for everything. It's the same thing I've used for all of it.
Nice. Yeah, like
well, you put a lot of good thought into your sound construction. You put a lot of attention to how you shape your unique bass sound, and you do have a unique bass sound.
And I love music, man. It's always been, there. It's, I'm going through a rough time. There's always a song to pick me up. If I'm, happy as hell, there's a song to get me going even more. And if I can take one track, if I can take a 4.5-minute track and add my bass to it by some other amazing musician, like I have with either Samuel at Samuel P. Lausen, it basically plays on, or Iceman 714. They put out amazing tracks. So if I can take my bass and put my bass on their tracks and make, somebody else happy or give somebody else drive to go, fuck, that's awesome. Maybe I want to go learn bass.
Hearing your bass track the other night made me want to go play. So yeah, when I hear a bass like that, it fires me up, makes me want to play.
Gives me the chills. I'd love to be playing with somebody. A band. I'd love to be on stage once in my life, but being on BandLab has been great. I've met a bunch of different musicians. I've met great people that are, awesome to talk to and help me shape my sound. And I think every musician should be in love with their sound in some form or another.
Should pay as much attention as you've been paying to building your bass sound. It shows in the sound how much attention you've put into it. Looking for that picky plucky sound in your bass is knowing what you want is the key to how you've gotten it. You knew what you were looking for, and you found the plugins and the approach to get what you wanted.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it on my own. It's been BandLab musicians that have helped me along the way. It's been great. I think this has been awesome. It wouldn't have been for coming in here and figuring out what I wanted and doing my own research. It doesn't go, it doesn't just come to you. You got to do the fucking research on it. You got to do the work. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a specific sound, you're going to need specific things. I wanted a specific sound. I did the research on these different things that were, revolving around the sound that I wanted, and this is where I've ended up, and I'm really happy with it. But it takes work. It does. It takes a lot of work.
And as you transitioned last night, basically, and you
And a
went
good
into
understanding of sound.
to get a good start on Cakewalk, to jump in just to try a track and to try to set this up and try to set that up. I mean, it was a good, essentially crash course getting you in there and doing that. And there's so much stuff that you're even like, we were talking about the TH3 tonight. That's like a whole nother universe that you're going to unlock over there. That's like a whole nother thing.
That's like,
it's like a kid in a
Another
candy store.
playground.
Like, exactly. You'll have like plenty of stuff to like work with all this stuff. And it's like, once you find one of these little spots into an area that you like, you can just go crazy with all the stuff that's in there. So it's great that you can, adventure through all that stuff.
It has been, and I thank everybody that's helped me along the way. Thank you guys. Talking to everybody else I've worked with on BandLab, it's been great.
Well, we're happy
want
to
more
see
people
you.
to work
We're
with.
happy to see you on the Cakewalk bandwagon.
Yeah. And even if you weren't,
Oh,
I mean,
man.
just being able to talk about the stuff in general, it's just easier to do it if we have a common frame of reference. So by doing it in Cakewalk, it's something that we could even, sending ideas back and forth, even if you were doing something in Ableton and somebody else is doing it in Fruity Loops and somebody else is doing it in whatever, we can still talk about the same concepts. And by going with more than one of the softwares, you're able to see how they translate one to the other. So you can see which concepts are more easily, discussed, like the track, and then, the fat channel and this and that, all the different things that you're trying to, the pro channel, trying to get everything straightened out.
Yeah, and as you guys showed me last night, my biggest worry.
You're useful to us because you're showing us how the transition from Ableton to Cakewalk. We're learning from you on the Ableton side, because I have a lot of clients and friends who are coming from Ableton that I don't have as much experience with. So knowing and seeing how the transition works for you is extremely useful for me.
If I honestly, not, pre-Cakewalk, I've recorded, kind of just quick recorded that track. I haven't actually like built the track or anything like that. Just the one take kind of thing to hear my sound real quick. That's all I've done with Cakewalk. But if I could, man, honestly, Ableton's been great. I had some discussions. I've been through a lot. I've been through Audacity. I've been through Ableton.
You might
I've been
still
through Pro
using
Tools.
Don't think that just because you got
it.
Cakewalk, you might still use it. There are certain compelling reasons to use every DAW. If I wanted to do the kind of loop and beat building, I'd be still doing with Fruity Loops. It's better for doing this.
Right. And Ableton's been great. If I could pay for a pro version of it, I more than likely would. It's been awesome. But as you guys showed me last night, this is kind of just a general conversation. If you've got a general knowledge on one of them, an actual DAW, a DAW, not something that's, this is for fun type DAW. We're talking like DAW. Cakewalk.
The DAW is just a DAW just is where you do the technique.
Right. If you have a general knowledge of one, as you guys showed me that I was worried about, you basically have a general knowledge of most of them. They're just set up in different manners. The
knobs are a
little
different.
Right. So if I help anybody or can push anybody to be more open to using something different, it's not as complicated as you may think. As I learned last night, it's not that bad. It's just a little bit more research. It's just something else to learn, but it may be worth that knowledge. It may be worth taking the time to figure out the different areas or button placements on Cakewalk compared to, opposed to Ableton. So I'm willing to make that leap. I'll do it. Hell yeah, I'm gonna go home and record one in it.
Yep. And one of the other things Tony was pointing out was the fact that one program might do this particular aspect of sound recording better than a different one, or you might like this tool better, or the workflow better, or whatever, like whatever you're more used to, or there's valid reasons to use this one for this and that one for that and that one for something else. But as you see, once you move from or you get over the whole difference between one and the other. You see that they're all very similar and that you can do the same things for the most part from one to the next to the next. And it's just finding the one that fits your workflow best or changing your workflow to fit
Exactly.
which program you like best.
Especially if the things you're doing, are plug-in specific, like the Parallax, you can load that in any
Right.
DAW that supports VST3. So that can move with you.
To me, at that
The
point,
reason why you might go
it's
to a certain DAW is a feature. So, like Fruity Loops does have some built-in features that aren't a standard in other DAWs. So
right. And I
that
know
is
it.
a
All of
reason to
them are
use a
different.
certain DAW.
They each have their own personalities, and to me, the reason that a person uses the DAW that they use is it's no different than any other music style or any other instrument that that person may particularly play. It's just a matter of personality. Until
Sometimes
each
it's the
has,
one they started with.
yeah, each has
If you
that
buy a
different
piece of equipment and it comes
workflow.
with Ableton, then you become an Ableton guy.
See, and that's not the way I went with it, because I actually, the very first one that I used was a while ago. I used to mess around with Audacity.
Yep.
And then,
Well, Audacity's been around since the 90s.
right. And that was more than likely when I was doing it. But I haven't done anything at all for years until recently, last November. In November, I started doing a lot of research on different DAWs, different VSTs. All this is new to me, every single bit of it. My sound, this is all, built within the last 10 months, since November. I've done my research. I've been through Pro Tools. I've, been through Ableton. I've been through Audacity. I've been through all these different things to find where I wanted to be that fit, which one worked best for me, which one was most comfortable for me to use and easiest to set up and easiest to understand and
And get to creative time.
that
Get
flow.
to jamming.
Yeah, right.
From setup to
Yeah.
jamming. The one that gets you there the
Ableton.
fastest is sometimes my favorite choice.
Yep.
Oddly enough, people are like, why? That's like the most hardest professional one to use. I'm like, to me, that's not. It's like the most simple. Pro Tools to me kind of blew my mind. The whole setup seemed more professional, and
Oh, it's why the pros
the
prefer it.
button placement are different, and so everybody has their own different. I know
If you
Sam
go to learn,
Lauzon uses Cubase.
if you go to learn engineering, they're going to teach you on Pro Tools. That's what you learn when you go to a music.
My brother actually is going through music. That's what they have him using is Pro Tools. He's doing mixing and mastering. They're doing it on Pro Tools.
Yep.
But it's still techniques. So everything that you learn there, when they show you how to do this in Pro Tools, the important thing to take away from it is the techniques.
It
Mixing
transfers
techniques,
over in one
compression,
way or
all these
another.
things that you understand, yes, they all transfer across every DAW. And if you're
It took
not
me a
picking
minute
up
to
the
realize
techniques and
that.
you're just learning, if you're just learning the steps to use a certain DAW and you're not picking up the techniques, then you're not really learning how to engineer.
Right.
You need to understand it as a technique. The
And all
DAW
the
just
sound
has a
that you've
different button on
gotten,
this one versus that one for the same approach.
Yeah,
right.
the DAW is the tool.
all the sound that you've
Yes.
gotten from me, I've had no music training. I didn't go to school for this. Like I said, I'm completely new to this since November, and this is just a
Oh,
personal
shit,
passion.
you're running along at
to
full speed if you've just been here since November.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have a really deep passion for my craft, and I really want to be that one of those bassists. Look, if anybody remembers my name, I'll be happy, man. If I made somebody smile today, or gave somebody the will to, like, the drive to get through a Monday afternoon,
The
hell yeah,
desire to
man. That's
mosh.
all I'm here for, man. I just want to make some music, and I want to learn how to do it correctly and put out some good shit. And so I mix and master a little bit of my own shit. I usually don't mess with the tracks that I play with too much. It's just when I get them, sometimes they sound a little bit muddy. So I take
If
them
you're
and I
getting
clean up
good
their signal a
signals,
little.
if you're generally getting good signals, you don't have to do a lot of adjusting. I mean, all the
I
remasters that I
export.
do, all my
I
remasters
actually
are
export.
bounced through a digital keyboard through USB. So every signal I is our good starting point. You really have to do a lot afterwards. If you
Right.
have to do a lot of adjustments post mixing, then chances are you're not doing everything you should do on the signal side and what you're capturing, especially
And
with
my signal
vocals
side,
and
yes.
those challenges.
And yeah, that I totally agree with. That I understand. I just haven't really had to deal with the input side of it too much, other than the bass and the guitar that you've heard me track. My input
Yeah,
side
and those are giving you great
on the
signals.
tracks, they
You're
are.
not
I'm
having
getting.
to
I
mess
realize that now.
post. You're already a great.
So the tracks that I do that you guys have heard on BandLab are tracks that have been done by musicians on BandLab, and the way I deal with them is I don't record into BandLab. Because for whatever reason I originally tried to. I started with BandLab, and I was getting this clicking. It was too slow. I started
I
playing
was
my
gonna
bass and it would
say
slow
with the
down.
Focusrites, the clicky poppy thing, Glenn does have a good fix for that as far as like forcing the refresh. But that's
Right.
why if you have Scarlett's or even my Roland, the online editor, I didn't touch because every time I tried to, it was clicky poppy, so horrible sounding. It was like,
Yep. So I
okay,
tried, and then I ended
but
up getting
but
to
you
the
hear
place
it while
where
you're recording.
right. So I got to the place where I couldn't stand that. It wasn't good enough for me. I couldn't deal with it, but I loved the idea of BandLab. I was still kind of
Mm.
doing, the research on it and stuff, and figured, fuck it, I'd give it a try. Ran into Sam, ended up loving one of his tracks. I'm like stalking him for a little bit, asking him about doing some bass on the track, and he ended up, amazing guy, sent me the track. And from that point, I started um, his advice actually, and it's done me really well, to export the track from BandLab as a WAV file, import it into your DAW. I track my bass on these files.
You learn the flow.
Yep, yep, yeah. I pull it over and drop it into my shit and track my bass to it. Make a little bit of adjustments. A lot of these songs I've done by Iceman, I've one track,
See, now last
played
night
through
when
them
you got
once.
Cakewalk, you got to experience project integration. You tested that with Cakewalk last night. How did
That
you
I think it was
think
cool. I
being
thought that
able to
was
suck your
awesome.
project up right into your tracks? Plus, it actually carries over some settings now. They're starting to actually integrate some of the settings over on the website to what goes into
Oh, nice.
Cakewalk. If you
Yeah,
set
I
your
thought that
settings
was
right,
actually
you'll
that was
get a dry track and a wet track for each
oh, nice.
settings. Set it to download the track mixes. You'll get that track dry and with effects.
Oh, sweet. Okay, that's awesome to know. I didn't know that, but yeah, that was kind of a selling point for me, that I'm doing all my work from BandLab, or that's how I'm getting my sound out right now, is everything centered around BandLab. So the ease of being able to pull a track from my Iceman directly into Cakewalk just at the click of a button was the selling point for me. That one's a killer. I like that, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to use my signal chain, my VSTs as I would set them up in Ableton
Yes.
was, awesome. The also another selling point, because I wouldn't have done it without being able to use my stuff.
And as Tony was saying about the track limitations, also, like, you can, once you pull it into Cakewalk, you shouldn't really be getting the clicks and the pops when you're doing recording directly in Cakewalk, even if you
Oh,
get
you'll never
large
get
limit
that.
files,
Oh, right, yeah.
because you're
No,
low.
Yeah, you'll
that
never
I've
have to deal with
seen.
that clicky poppy shit in Cakewalk.
Well, it doesn't run across the internet. It's its own integrated DAW,
Yeah,
but it flows
and it's not limited
effortlessly in
to the
between the two.
the problem with the clicky poppy is that it's going through a browser and it's
Yeah,
using the
that's what I was
audio
saying.
API. The audio API has limitations with especially better sound equipment. The more professional your sound equipment is, ASO equipment doesn't play nice with the online DAW. But with
And I
Cakewalk,
figured that out.
it's the preferred choice. Cakewalk sees the ASO equipment and says, "Yay,
Oh, it
I
acted
can
all
work
sorts
with
of
that."
happy. It was like, hey, yeah, there it is. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yours like just right out the box was ready to go. Those Focusrites are great choices for anybody who's starting off with Cakewalk or any of these DAWs,
Sorry
especially
guys,
for
it's getting dark
vocals.
here.
The Focusrites are very friendly with all these DAWs. They set up
And
easy.
it was cool. It was, you know, the crossing between the two, the idea and how it did it was effortlessly. It was just a couple of clicks of a button, download it, and it set itself up.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
you're
definitely got to
luckier
dig
with
into
your
that.
Scarlet. My Roland was a little more of a bat. It's 10 years old or 12 years old at this point. So.
And I don't know how old mine is actually. I run a Scarlet 2i4. I know
The
second
second
gen
generation would
2i4
be
they
like
don't make.
4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one I didn't know. But yes, it's the Scarlet 2i4, but you know, it's done me really well. Like I said, again and again and again, I love my tone so far. I know it needs adjustments, but it's been that Scarlet that's pushing me along the way, man. It's been a crazy
Yeah, and if
ride.
you ever want to do vocals, it's mic preamps. I don't know with the second generation though. That was one of the big jumps. With the third generation, they added mic preamp effects. They call
I
it
know this
airy,
one has the
and
phantom
it
power.
really does. Well, yeah, the phantom power should always be there because that's one of the selling points. They do have just good mic preamps in general. But the third generation introduced what they call airy, which is this like vocal um, sweetener that you can turn on, and it really does like sizzle up the mic preamp and makes even crappy mics sound pretty damn good.
We were able to
Right.
pull that as a VST. Also, they had a VST for the Airy.
Yeah, yeah, you're seeing
Oh, really?
everybody wanting to incorporate this kind of boost
Matter
compression.
of fact,
What it
yeah,
basically
I've
does.
actually heard about that watching a video on from again GGD. They had talked about in one of their VSTs. It's the smash and grab. Looks like a really good VST, but within that VST, they have an airy control.
Oh, I'll show you a couple ways to get that out of the box in Cakewalk. The TH3 has one called Airy that is, like I said, use it on every project just to boost some things and to give like little extra delay or echoes here or there. It's a guitar processor, but you can run anything through it. I run vocals through it, piano. It's just how much you run through it. Like you turn the signal back, but you just send a little bit and it can produce a nice boost overall to all your tracks.
One of Tony's other favorites is the Sonatus surround in order to
Yeah,
be able to move things around in
that's
soundscape.
just that's a great time saver. Like in the old days,
I
to
do
to,
use
to
that
do that
surround a little
movement
bit
in
on
the old
some of my
days
tracks
with
if I can.
automation, I don't want to have to sit there and automate each step of the sound as I want it to bounce, especially if I want it to bounce in a pattern. You know, bouncing sound around in a tempo beat is useful when you have drums that like you want them to be moving. You can turn it on in literally like 3 seconds and make your drums move around.
It's definitely a fun one.
Mm. You just use
Yeah,
it
and I'm
judiciously.
excited to play with all of it. I'm kind of surprised that it's free, to be honest with you.
Well, you can thank Steve Gibson for that. You know, when he bought Cakewalk from, I think at the time it was whoever was calling it Sonar, he put it under the BandLab umbrella, and that's why it's free. All you need to be is a BandLab member. I'm already a BandLab member, so it's not a hard
Yeah,
sell
see, and
on
when
me.
I actually had read when I was doing a bunch of research on finding a dog, you know, going through Pro Tools and Ableton and doing the online research, I came across Audacity, which kind of blew me away. I haven't seen it forever, but then you've got like PreSonus, they've got all their audio shit now. I
Oh, and
did
they've
come
got some
across
great
an
hardware.
article on
Oh
Cakewalk,
yeah, they do.
but I kind of just blew over it. And so when you guys had mentioned it, Cakewalk, and that it was DAW, and I remembered I read about it, and it was supposed to be like $600 or something like that,
Yeah,
and
it
I'm like,
used to
yeah, I
be.
can't do it.
Used to be.
So I'm kind of excited to play with it, but
Having it integrate with your BandLab projects is really just gravy at this point.
I
That
love that.
makes
I'm
it
excited to
really
play with
cool
it.
because you don't have to suck down those waves and then bring them in, import them into your DAW.
Yeah,
Eventually,
and that's exactly what I've been doing.
I would see them, they could integrate their online integration into any DAW. If they build that integration in as a VST plugin, then even Ableton, you should be able to connect to your BandLab account and suck the same information. If they're smart, that's what they're going to, in the long run, that's a feature, that's a service. Why would I pay to be on BandLab every month? Because I can run this filter and I can use it on any DAW and suck my tracks up. It's the collab part that's their value.
Right.
And a
And I
plugin
find that pretty
would
cool.
let you
I
go
don't
in
know.
anywhere.
For one, to me, it's a big, like, I'm still kind of in shock that it's free. You know, all these plugins, all these professional grade plugins that you get to play
They
with
do
for
give you a
free.
couple of them. You have a couple of
And then,
synthesizers in there you're going to love. You're going to be like, oh my God,
right.
I got a
And
full
then
blown synth.
the ability to use VSTs, VST2s, VST3s, you know, use your outside plugins within this DAW, and then to be able to integrate in between your DAW and the website that you obsess over constantly is just kind of a fucking cool thing. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
To suck those individual tracks up. So you can get Iceman's guitar and CP's bass and Dunlap's drums, all on their own
Yeah.
tracks, sucking up into your DAW. It's going to make me interact more with BandLab now that they've added this to Cakewalk. Because for me, the downloading process from this slow connection, one project can take me over an hour just to get the tracks downloaded. Now with it integrated, it's about 15 minutes. It's much gentler.
Yeah, I usually just export them as a WAV file and pull them right into
Which you have to do
Ableton and
one
track
at a
them.
time. If you're, especially in the old days, they added features to export like all of them as MP4s, but it was always a pain in the ass. If I had to go grab 8 tracks to bring it down to Cakewalk so I could do some shit to it, and then I don't want to have to upload 8 tracks back. Usually I'm putting a mix back up, a single track
That's what I've been doing.
master.
Yeah, once I get mine done, once I get my bass put on it, that's usually what everybody gets back. When I upload it back in, it's just a single file, just with my bass tracked on.
It'd be nice to be able to put the tracks back up, though. I would love to I'd put my project up with all its tracks if they could handle 50, 60.
I don't know. People are going to start stealing my bass now because I can track my bass with my parallax. They can just pull it. Sweet. This is going to be awesome.
Hey, people steal my music all the time. I don't mind.
No, I'm good with it. All my shit's portable all the time.
Yeah, I've come across every corner of BandLab at this point where I've heard one of my tunes like someplace. I'm like, how did this get here?
That's got to be a good feeling though, and that's what I'm looking for. Like me, I do it every morning. I got my phone in my hand and I'm on BandLab looking at the trending list. I'm still waiting for my first one to hit trending.
Yeah,
Well,
for me, it's
hopefully you get them paying attention on the like rock and metal side. Their trending list there are lacking. They need to add more.
I wish I knew what was going on with their trending list. I look at it every once in a while and go, what the hell? Like, I've got a track that's got twice as many plays as that and twice as many likes. So why isn't my track on there? Like, I don't get their algorithm. I don't
Same here.
But
I think it's a human, not an algorithm.
yeah,
It's a human, and they're more into the hip hop than they are the metal, and the rock they should be into. I mean, that's not a hard category to on BandLab.
Or
Rock
they
is a
should have
constant.
somebody that is into rock that can give a better list than
They
that.
should be talking to you and Jason and Joe and for sure Angie. Like, just go ask
Damn,
her.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of good tracks coming out. Metal Monday, 2 for Tuesday, a lot of good submissions. Been a lot of great artists on BandLab, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's
I
been
think
nice.
we need to start searching more.
Monday has bled over like to the other half of the
Oh,
week.
always, dude. It makes me feel good when it does.
if they start with metal on Monday, there's always some leftovers.
Always, man. You know me. I'm gonna come with a little bit of icing on the cake for Tuesday.
You can't go wrong if you're grabbing from Iceman Tracks because
That's
he is
right.
like 99% metal goodness.
I want to hear some more fucking stuff from Sam, man. I kind of miss that dude. Him, Iceman, and Vegan Zombie were like some of the first three that I followed,
Oh, isn't
and
Vegan
their
incredible?
sound or
Yeah.
oh, dude, his
The
voice
sound of
is just
his voice is soothing.
phenomenal.
When I hear it,
Really.
it's like my ears feel pleased.
Well, and it's weird. I'm a bass player. I came here for to learn things, but find other guitarists I could work with, and vocalists and drummers, but no shit. Vegan Zombie, a vocalist, was my first follow on BandLab.
Yeah,
And
it's a good
some of those
start for sure.
drummers, some of the drummers, you run across a Dunlap or a Callahan, like
Oh, dude,
I've
I
never
tracked
had
the Dunlap.
access. Oh yeah, Iceman and Dunlap are like Superman and Batman to me.
Yeah, dude, they put out some fucking great tracks together. They really do.
Yeah, Dunlap is
Even
one of the
without
most
any bass
talented,
on them, they sound amazing.
let alone how awesome he is at drums. But that guy can actually do anything in music and do it good. Have you ever heard him sing?
I haven't, not yet.
Ah, him and CP Groove, they're like they're not really closet singers. Especially CP now. Like I always knew him as a bassist, but once you start hearing him sing, you're like, holy shit, man! You're good on the
And that's
bass,
funny
but
because
damn, you actually
I
sing like exceptional.
yeah, I'm running into a lot of bandland members that are actually really multi-talented. Like
Yeah.
Sam, I've had a lot of people ask me about him. Actually, no shit.
Well, I always
Doesn't
thought he
he
was a
play bass?
bassist in the early
Yeah,
days.
so
Yeah.
you're one that's that. No, he's actually a guitar player. He is a guitar player, and the whole reason that he even touched a bass, from what he told me, if I remember correctly, was right before I started talking to him, he actually got his bass because he couldn't find anybody to write bass with him.
Yeah.
I'm like, you gotta be shitting me, man. And I feel like my bass flows really well with his tracks. I love his rock style, his writing style, the way he plays. I feel like my bass line just kind of flows in with his tracks really nicely if I mix them correctly.
Well, that's it. With the kind of sound that you sculpt there, it does pose a bigger mixing challenge, but it's a fun one. That kind of poppy bass, every time that I've got tracks, especially all this Pink Floyd shit I'm doing where every song has a fretless bass, a pick bass, and sometimes even a couple of other ones. Waters did a lot of layers of these things. You have a bigger mixing challenge, but it's a fun one to learn and perfect.
Right. And I'm excited too. I actually have, so I've put out a couple of tracks that have Sam's done that I put bass on. He's been awesome enough to send me. I did put out two of them that I will say right now that will be coming back out. I have tracked them, recorded them, thrown them out to BandLab. But as I've sculpted my sound, as I've made the tweaks and adjustments that I've needed to, these were earlier tracks that I've done that I'm going to redo and re-put out with a better sound. So look
Yeah.
forward to those.
And you will always be doing that. I have several people who are now in the process of redoing all their songs simply because now they have a new way to do things and they want to redo their songs.
Right.
I'm
Right.
doing that myself. I'm going back 30 years at this point trying to pull everything salvageable because now I know how to do things in a much better way.
And it may be that way for me down the road, but right now my mindset is I would honestly like to get my sound out there. I'd like to be consistently writing with somebody. Not per se one person or a group of people, but consistently writing with somebody, putting tracks out, that are getting known or recognized at some point. So my mindset is
That's
get
what's
one
nice
done, get my sound out.
with all the musicians that I've run across now, especially with Ange, and all the remasters that I've been doing for the last 2 years, I have literally hundreds of singers accessible now because I've heard everybody who can sing on BandLab at least on one of my tracks, and with all the people that Ange brings around her, I know I'm gonna be writing this song with that person, this song with that person. Ange, I got a zillion to go behind her. She can
Right.
literally like
I
produce a song on the fly.
I'd imagine, you find a group of people that, a certain sound for a certain song you like start and okay, I want to write a new song. It's going to be a rock style. So I've got these rock vocalists, these rock guitarists, these rock bassists, these rock drummers. Which ones are going to mix together to make the sound that I want? And I figured that's the way it's going to be with me. Okay, I'm writing a new song.
And
I'll
that's what
go
I've
with
been loving
DJ
with the
Zombie
metal,
for the vocals, and I'll go Sam for the guitarist
with
on
these,
lead. I'll go with Iceman for rhythm.
yeah, with these metal influences that have been popping up now with the metal shows. Now I'm getting access to like metal singers and drummers. I mean, ironically, Jason is as talented of a drum programmer as he is a freaking singer and a guitarist. Turns out, like, programming metal drums is a
It's not
skill.
easy. Yeah,
No,
it's not
I,
easy. I had to
I,
get a
I
program
spent
for it.
20 years trying to figure it out, and it's
He was
just
getting
as
crazy
hard to
results.
program it as it is to play it.
He was getting really good results, definitely.
Right. And I
he
and
knows
I
he
didn't
knows how
want
to
to get
use
into
his
that.
drumming.
I was searching more for my sound, so it was easiest for me like, okay, I want my sound, but I need a beat to go to so I can write
Yeah.
this and this and this so I can figure out my sound. So what I did was I went out and I bought the Get Good drums
The contact.
the metal one. Uh
Yeah, I
yeah,
I've heard
I
that one. That
forgot.
one is awesome.
So I went and got that one. It just has the free, samples, but there's fucking hundreds of samples, dude. Like a bunch of different tempo variations, and you can
Yeah.
vary tempos as you want to, and pull, this clip from this and this and this, and put it together. And that's how I've been making my songs. I'm pulling clips from
There's
that
another one
DVD.
I bet you'll like. Steinberg Groove Agent. They're on version 5, and I can show you that at some point. It's a virtual drummer, and it does work off of like MIDI loops to some extent, but it's also an algo drummer where you kind of shape based on styles, and it's not
That's what
just a
I'm looking
drum
for.
machine. It really does allow you to make adjustable beats based off of a mixture of genres, tempos, and other knobs. It's a different approach than like your
So
traditional
I
drum.
I know there's actually not Pro Tools, not Ableton. There's the other one.
Easy Drummers, the one Jason uses, which is part of Superior Drummer, same company.
There's one of these DAWs, one of the you know higher up, more professional DAWs like Pro Tools and shit like that. I don't remember the name. It's not Cubase, Ableton, or anything. But it has one of those drummers. You could. They've
Oh,
got the
actually,
different
all of these
dials.
do. You have a drummer in
Ableton, I
Cakewalk.
haven't seen.
You have a drummer
Oh,
in
does it?
Cakewalk. Well, the one that comes with it, the SI kits, it gives you a virtual bassist. It gives you a virtual, semi-virtual drummer. I mean, it's a drum kit for the most part.
Right.
But Cakewalk actually drops a bunch of MIDI loops and other things into your content folder. You want a basic drum beat, you go look in those little MIDI loops. There's actually a bunch of starting ones there. And you can
And
bring
I
up the
went with
grid
GGB.
and paint all day, which is like the approach Jason takes, where he's
And
just
that's kind of
looking
what I'm
at
curious
the
about.
kit and just paint one on first hits. Here's the snares, paint here.
That's how I
If
want to be able to do
if
my
you can
drums
see
because
it,
my bass
yeah.
lines that I
If you
write
can
are
see it and
kind
do
of
it,
right. My bass lines, when I actually just play, when I'm playing to per se GGD, I have a habit of running with the kick drum as it comes. Like it basically forces my style to a certain extent. But when I play by myself, I have a totally different style that I want people to be able to hear. I do have a different kind of writing style. I just can't, one, program my own drums because I don't know how yet, and I haven't
Well,
had that
I
ability
will show
in
you.
Ableton.
I will show you where it is in Cakewalk. And once you know it's there, chances are you'll probably do it.
Oh, we're gonna
I
have
still
fun.
don't.
Yeah, people are
I've
gonna
never
hear some
been.
different stuff coming out of
I've
me.
never liked. I've never liked programming. It's ironic that I do so much MIDI, but I hate having to program my drums. I don't have a groove for it any more than I do trying to play the drums on the keyboard.
It's
That's why I
something I'm
like
going to
Groove
look more
Agent.
into, though, is the programming of the drums for sure, because that is a
Oh
Right.
big
yeah,
part.
Glenn, I'm surprised you haven't already dug all that up.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's where I usually end up short. Though, is I end up, I can do the bass parts, I can do guitar parts, I can do keyboard parts. But when it comes to drums, I'm usually limited to what I can actually play on an electric kit or what I
They're
can
a
come
different
across on a
beast.
keyboard. It's a different beast, and
They're
I'm
a
starting to get a little bit
different
smoother,
beast
but it's
of
still very simplistic.
programming, and you got to have some kind of groove in you. I've never been the groover.
But the one thing is a video like the one we watched a couple of weeks ago, actually, Tony, with that circular representation of drum grooves,
Oh
watching
yeah,
like the four on the floor and
yes.
seeing how it looks graphically on
I
that like
would
target,
I would program if I could get a program that lets me do it that way.
because that was a
Seeing
good
it
way
in
to
a
look at it.
circular motion is much easier to see the whole 4/4 or 3/4.
And the fact that it's a loop going around instead of going from the beginning to the end and looping back to the beginning, it's very it seems very jumpy almost when you're looking at the way it goes through. It's not as
Yes.
doesn't make as much sense, but when you're watching it sweep around, you could literally just watch a second hand going around and you'll see it hitting this one, that one, this one, that one, going
And,
all the way
and
around.
I'm really
Groove
kind of
Agent
curious about that now.
Groove Agent does have a similar circle approach as far as the genres go. Like you can turn up the complexity of a drum beat. You can start with a real simple drum beat like
Right.
doom cha, and as you bring up the complexity and the different settings around the circle, you can add a drum element like, oh, here's some hi-hat play, or here's a little ride cymbal, and then as you change the complexity on that ride cymbal, it'll go from to you know those complexity levels will give you more or less of a specific drum.
That's actually what I liked
Right.
about some of what I had in GarageBand. Actually, when I was looking
Yeah,
for drummers in
GarageBand
GarageBand,
is
because
a popular one for that. People assimilate to GarageBand really fast.
one was
I will
like you're
give
saying, where
Apple credit there.
each individual instrument can be, like you said, more complex or less complex or louder or softer. But there was also a slider for how much you wanted the drum to basically, how much you wanted them to stick very rigid to the timing and how much you wanted them to kind of float and do fills and all that kind of stuff. So you could make
Yeah,
them very, very loose and very,
are
very
you playing quarter? Playing
yeah,
quarter notes or sixteenths?
yep,
Is this
or
metal?
See, and that's kind of the cool
and it can
thing
be
about
fills and stuff.
GDB is it
Hmm.
has, you can actually program each individual setting. I wish I could show you guys, but each different, like tom, the kick, the hi-hat, the crash, each one of those you can actually set the how hard they
Oh
hit.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can
With
set what
MIDI,
tune each one's at.
The
with
velocities, yeah.
with MIDI, you
Yeah, the
have
velocity.
multiple ways.
Thank you.
With MIDI, you can do levels, and levels is just like it is in everything else. It's 0 to 127, from no sound to like as hard as you can hit it. You can do
Right.
velocity, which is an awesome one. That's where the expression pedals and the shit you see guitarists. If you want to make a keyboard sound like a real guitarist, you have to give it a lot of expression through MIDI in order to make those MIDI guitars do what a human does with his fingers.
And you got to get those bends in
Oh
there.
yeah.
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't know about all that, but I play that shit on
Between
my own.
expression, velocity, modulation, um, those three will let you shape any sound and give it a thump or a swoop back. Those are the three MIDI expressions to know when you have access to them with an instrument. And a drum kit, you don't want to hit it at the same level every time.
What I really want to experiment with is one of those like Akai pads, the 16, soft pads where you can program them for different drum hits. Like I don't
Yeah,
have one right now, but that's something I would definitely work on.
and those Akai pads are awesome. If you're gonna get any of those drum pads, Akai has the nicest feeling ones. The rubbery snapback that you get on those is worth every penny of their drum equipment. They've been doing it right since the 80s with that.
And just
And I
after
wish I
seeing some people and
remembered
how well
what
they use them.
brand it was. That ASIS, AISIS, or AESIS, or some shit like that.
Oh, I know
I
who you're
actually
talking
went
about.
off and I bought one of their, $800 drum sets with the electric module and all that stuff. And here shortly,
Actual pads with the drumsticks.
an actual setup,
Oh,
an actual drum setup.
yeah. I have
Um,
wanted one since they came out.
if I work
And I'm
my
not a
nerve
drummer.
up here shortly, you guys will actually be hearing me on the drums along with the bass and guitar.
Awesome.
I just haven't worked up the nerve to do it yet.
Oh, when you get that, let's record the unboxing of that. I
I
would
can't.
love.
It's been set up for a while.
Okay, well then let's record what it can do. I have wanted
Well,
to play with a digital kit. Dunlap's the only one who has a killer digital kit.
I'm not a drummer. I don't play like I by no means have like that spice a drummer does. I can play right now. I can play, your basic drum lines. I can do little fills and stuff like that, but I'm by no means, a drummer. I can
Well,
just do little shit
I
that can get
guarantee
me
you,
going.
you're going to start having fun when all of a sudden you're hitting that tom and it's a timpani, or you're getting like a boom out of something, and you're like, "Oh my god!" I
Right, and it's
can.
got its own different settings on there. Like it gives you like 50 different freaking drum settings, but then I know it runs in MIDI. I can run it through MIDI through USB, and you can run
All
it through
those
MIDI track
kits
and make
that it
everything
gives you
sound the way you want it.
are useful. Those kits that it gives you are useful. That if it came with a hardware synth, that's always useful to have to hit with those drums. But after you're hitting them, when you're recording in Cakewalk, you're sequencing. You're not recording the audio. You're recording what you're hitting. In Cakewalk, I'll show you how to go to any kit you want anywhere.
It's all just
Nice.
triggers the sounds
So
that you have.
the world of drum kits is at your beck and call once you sequence your drum beat. You're
Yeah, and I don't
recording
know how to
you're
set
recording
up
the
the
notes.
MIDI.
You're recording the notes, how hard you're hitting them. Sequencing is like real-time notation. It doesn't record
Right.
the sound. It records what you're doing to make the sound.
So the ones that it comes pre-programmed with, I actually have a couple of tracks where I have played the drums on them. I have drum line or not drum lines. I've played the drums and I've got bass lines on them. The way I recorded them was I actually ran a 1/4-inch cable from the back of the module where it gives you both stereo and mono outputs. I ran a stereo input into my Scarlett, played it and recorded it into Ableton, and then obviously cut out the dead area, the dead recorded space where I took the time to walk from recording the button
The
to
dark
sitting
matter.
down playing. Yeah. But I do have a couple of tracks that have been played like that. The drum kits that they do give you on there, like I said, there's like 50 or 52 or something like that. I've
Yeah.
got probably 3 tracks where I've tracked bass on them, and each one has a different drum set that I've used, and they all sound great.
Oh yeah, that's one thing that's nice with all these new samplers that I get nowadays. They come with a great collection of drum kits. I use Halion, and there's at least like 50 or 60 kits in there that are all individually useful. I've used more than half of them. It's a nice thing about doing these remasters. You're always looking for a slightly different kind of drum sound when you're jumping across genres.
Yeah, so I'm really curious. I'm right now as I'm still kind of sculpting my sound and kind of making a position for myself. I've stuck a lot to my regular genre, rock, metal, where
Oh,
I'm comfortable.
that's a
I
versatile
know the
genre to play
sound.
in.
It's a good neighborhood.
Yeah,
Right.
it's my
So I've
favorite
stuck
neighborhood.
there, but I am really excited to get out there and do different things. Like I mentioned in a previous show, I know our wonderful Ticey. Tyson McCurdy, she's done a track that she actually tracked bass on, and then had me double track it with my 5-string. She tracked it with a 4, I tracked it with a 5.
Nice.
She's doing vocals on it. It's coming out, but it is a different style for me. Like it felt really weird to play. It's a slow song.
I like the experimentation using like 2 basses, one with a 4-string and one with a 5-string. And I'm
I'll tell you,
curious
it
to
sounds
see
good.
if you utilize the the 5-string advantage. If you utilize it properly, you can get a
I will
cool
tell you.
blend of those 2 approaches.
Well, I'll give you a basic setup on it. It is a slow song. I hope she puts it out soon because it really did end up coming out really good with both on it. I let her basically, she came to me with the melody. We actually live close to each other. She came to me with the melody. She wrote the bass line on it. It has a really nice fucking, groove to it. And so she does the basic song. And throughout the song, I don't know, to everybody that has listened to me and knows that I like to, fuck around a lot. When I have the time for it, when the space calls for it. Basically, I took the track and I just kind of harmonized the entire thing up and down the board the entire time, up and down, up and down. And it came out fucking great. Like, you get a lot of low end, you got her nice, mid-range bass that covers it. And then you've got me kind of up on the higher end, on and off, kind of harmonizing what she's playing.
Basically, no pun intended, huh?
Right. It turned out really great. I'm really hoping she puts it out soon. It's a nice track. I don't know what vocals are going on it. I don't know anything about that. I don't know if she's even got them done yet. But yeah, the track itself is really nice.
Well, get it all ready and we'll jam that out on one of the nights. Show me here.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
the only way I can hear anything anymore.
Okay, guys. Well, I am headed home. Once I get home, I'll get back on, but I am jumping off for a minute for the drive home.
Yeah, I'll be up
Sounds
for a
good, man.
while. And that bus video, I'd like to check that out.
Yeah.
We
I got that queued up.
Yeah. We'll finish off tonight for them. Watch this video.
Cool.
That's it.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Everybody
Yep.
have a good night. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, it was great to talk again, Greg.
Catch you next
Keep it
time.
rocking.
Let's see here. We had creative sauce, right? So going into the how to use routing sends and buses in Cakewalk.
Yeah, I'm interested to see his approach.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about routing buses and sends in Cakewalk by BandLab. Now, if you're a beginner, this is going to be great for you, but even if you're experienced, you may pick up something that you don't already know.
That's why
Hi
I
folks,
love it.
I'm Mike and I hope
Exactly.
you're well. So understanding how audio is routed around your console in Cakewalk can not only affect your workflow, but can actually affect the sound of the final product itself. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the very basics of routing in Cakewalk. Then we're going to be looking at some more intermediate and advanced routing in Cakewalk. And also we're going to be taking a look at some Cakewalk specific features, which even if you've been using it for a while, you may not be aware of. But before we get stuck into that, if you do like this kind of content, all about home recording, DAWs, gear reviews, plugin reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you are notified about those future videos. Now let's get stuck into some routing. So here we are in a near empty project in Cakewalk. The only thing I've added is one short electric guitar part, and you can see that right on the left hand side of the console view here. And if I play it for you quickly, it goes like this. Told you it was short. Good for demonstration purposes, maybe not for my next hit single. So we've got that one track there, and then by default, Cakewalk creates 3 buses off the bat, and you can see them over towards the right here. Now, tracks and buses are separated by this divider here, which is draggable. So I'm going to drag
I
it
always
over
delete
so that we
those
can put them all
buses.
together, and then we can zoom in and take a closer look. Now, of these
Yep, that's the first
three
place he's going.
buses which Cakewalk has created by default, I'm only
I mean, they're
actually going to be using
suggestions.
one
You don't
of them.
need
So I'm going to
them
get rid of the other
unless
two.
you
But let's
plan on
take a
using
quick
them.
look at what they are. So the first bus we have is the master bus. You can see its label at the bottom there. And that's the one we're going to keep. All tracks by default when you create them will be routed through to the master bus. A little bit more in detail on that routing a little bit later. Then we have the metronome bus here. We won't be using the metronome at all today, but if you have a project open, you still need the metronome, don't delete this, but I don't need it, so I'll right click and
Nobody
delete
wants
that
the
bus.
metronome.
Then we have the preview bus. What this is in Cakewalk, there's a browser section where you can listen to, sort of loops and things, and you can preview them by clicking on preview buttons there, and the sound then comes through to this channel here. We don't need that. In fact, I hardly ever use it, so I'll right click and delete it. So we're left with our main two channels here, but there are a couple of other hidden sort of channels with faders that you may not know about. So I'll zoom back out here again. And if we look all the way over to the right hand side of the interface, there's actually another divider here, which is always squashed up to the right hand side. And if I drag that out, you can see that there's some more faders here. Now, you may have less than this, you may have more than this. It depends on the audio interface you're using. And that's what these faders represent. Each pair of them represents outputs on your audio interface. Now, on my audio interface, I actually have lots and lots of outputs which are not enabled in Cakewalk, but what I do have enabled here is my master output, which is where my speakers, the output for my speakers goes. And then I have a couple of headphone outputs here, and I can control the overall volume of those, and I can route things to them so that I can create separate mixes for different headphone outputs. Now, that's not something we're going to be going through at all today, but I did just want to let you know it's
Now
there.
you see where that's
it
useful
may be
with the
that your audio
multi-headsets?
interface only actually has
being able to
one or
find
two
where that
outputs,
extra
in which
drawer is.
case you don't need to worry about this too much at all. So I'll drag that all the way back across to hide it, as we won't be using it. And let's zoom back in again and take a closer look at these two channels which we have here. So the first one, as I say, is the guitar track. And you always want to think of signals as starting at the top of these channels and working their way down through to the bottom. So with this guitar channel, we start at the top here, and the signal from the guitar hits this gain control here. Now, this is not something you have on all DAWs, but with Cakewalk, it's built into the channel here. And I reckon it's really, really handy. This means you can set up a nice, healthy signal right at the beginning of your signal chain. If you want to know what a healthy signal is, take a look at my gain staging tutorials. I've done 2 or 3 of them already on the channel. After it's gone through the gain control there,
Now,
it then
that is
makes
one
its
to
way
check out for
through
sure.
to the Pro
That's
channel.
definitely coming up.
Now, the Pro channel is kind of similar to the effects channel, which is just down here, just after it. But of course, it's specific to Cakewalk, and it's always going to be there. If we expand it a little bit here, you'll see that I've already got a couple of modules in there, a compressor and an EQ. So what happens is the signal, when it comes into the Pro channel, starts off with this compressor at the top of the signal here. And after it's finished compressing the guitar, it then takes that compressed signal and sends it to this EQ. That's important. It takes the compressed signal and send it to the EQ. It's working through things in sequence, starting from the top, working its way through to the bottom. Now, as I say, the Pro channel behaves in a very similar way to the effects section here. So I won't be going through this in much detail, if at all, today. I won't be touching on it
Big selling point right on its own.
In any case, both of those modules are actually switched off at the moment, so they're not affecting
It's
my
thousands
signal
of
at all.
dollars
So I'll
worth of
collapse
equipment.
that back in there. So after we've dealt with the
lots of
Pro
ability to
channel,
control things.
the signal then works through to the effects section here. And this is where we insert effects. That could be compressors, EQs, reverbs, delays. There's so many of them. There's a few which come with Cakewalk. There's some that you can buy. And there's a few free ones available as well, which I've often talked about. The important thing to understand here is it does work through each effect in sequence, just as it did in the Pro channel.
What his choices are.
I'm going to be talking about
Got some
some
good ones coming up
important
right here.
considerations with that in the next little section, but we'll get back to that because it is quite important. Even if you've used it many times before already, there may be some things you haven't considered in terms of sequence. So after it's finished with the effects module, then it goes through to the sends section. Now, the sends section may appear to be similar to the effects section, but it actually behaves very, very differently. And there's some specific reasons why you would use this and not the effects section. And you may have wondered about this if you're just starting out
More
with
versatility.
home recording. And don't worry, I'm going to make that clear about why you would make those decisions a little bit later. After it's finished with the send section, it then works its way down through to the pan and then through to the master fader, which of course controls the overall sort of output from that channel. Now, where does it go from the channel is the important thing. By default, as I mentioned, it goes through to the master section here. And you can see that if you go down to this bottom drop down here where you can select different outputs, it is set to master already. We'll be talking about that a little bit later because that is quite important, because you may sometimes want to send it off to
Now, that is one way to
places.
route your ASO.
So as I say, it starts at the top, it works its way down through, and then I sort of think of it as going across and then back up to the top of this bus, which it gets sent to, which is the master bus, and then it does the same thing again. It works its way down through from the top all the way down to the bottom in the same way before it hits its output from the master bus there, which in this case is that master output on my audio interface, which I talked about earlier. So with all of that said about the basic routing, let's take a look at what actually happens in the effects section. Now, as I say, it's important to remember with the effects section that we start at the top of it and we work through each plugin or effect in sequence. And you'll often hear people talking about the order of effects chains and what is a good order, especially, for example, with compression and EQ. Should it be EQ first or then compression?
There's a lot of debate.
The answer is it depends, but we'll talk about that in
a great
another
example
video.
right here with this.
But oftentimes it's
And he has the right
difficult
answer.
to hear the effect which is
depends.
happening, especially if you're just starting out. You may not hear the difference between having effects in a different order. So I've kind of tried to set up an example here, which is a really sort of really obvious when you actually hear it. So we've got our guitar track, which, as you remember, just plays one chord, and I've got a couple of effects on here. So the first one is a delay effect. So if we've got it switched off at the moment, we'll just play the guitar track to remind you. Just that, right? Okay. And if we switch the delay on, what we've got is several sort of repeats with almost a second between them. Let's have a listen. And of course, they get quieter and quieter as it goes on. That's important, but we'll get back to that. We'll switch that off and we'll have a look at the next effect which we've got in there, which is this TH3
the best gift
effect,
that
which
comes
comes
with
for
Cakewalk.
free with Cakewalk, a whole bunch of guitar effects in there, amp simulations, etc.
They have a better
and all I've
one.
got here is just an overdrive pedal, which is going to overdrive the guitar.
Which you
So let's have a look,
out.
listen to that.
It's this on steroids.
So the important thing about overdrive, of course, and this is important, is it needs a certain amount of signal, a certain level of signal to actually start to overdrive. If the signal is quiet, then the guitar will remain relatively clean. Now that's important because remember, the delay gets quieter and quieter as it goes. You may be ahead of me here, but I'll continue anyway. So what's the combined effect of these two things? We'll switch on the delay. So the delay is the first thing that the guitar hits, and then it goes through to that overdrive. Let's have a listen and see if you can hear what's happening. Now, if you're not sure what I'm alluding to, then just rewind the video and have another listen. What actually happens is we start off with a very overdriven guitar, and as each repeat goes by and the signal gets quieter, it not only gets quieter, but it gets less overdriven. Another quick listen.
Because it's going into the overdrive.
Yep.
Flip it around and you're going to get
and
a
that's
different
because
sound.
the delay plugin is continually generating more signal after a delay, and each signal has less level. and it's hitting that guitar plugin, that TH3 overdrive plugin, with less signal. So it's affecting it in a different way each time it hits it. So what if you actually wanted that overdriven sound to be repeated again and again? Easy. You would just swap the two around. So what's going to happen here is the main signal is going to hit
good effects
its sort of top level, that overdriven
Exactly.
overdrive plugin, overdriven plugin. Could work either way. And then that overdriven signal then hits the delay, and the delay repeats the overdriven signal again and again. So it sounds like this.
Definitely an important difference.
So always when you're thinking about the sequence of your plugins, you want to be thinking about the way
think of the sound you would be wanting to get
next
there.
plugin, and whether it's going to be affecting it in the way that you want it to. It's a very overt example. You don't often get examples as overt as that. Oftentimes, as I say, people are considering it in terms of, you know, should I have the EQ first and then the compressor, or both, or what have you.
It would be a lot harder to understand if you showed
So that's
that.
the effects section and the sequence of
the
things
new,
there.
For
We're
the
going to be
new
moving
user,
on to sends,
this
which
is
acts in
very
quite
obvious.
a different way. Now, as I mentioned, sends behave quite differently to effects inserts, and we're going to be taking a look at that now. So I've got my guitar chord here again. And I'm going to start off by creating a send through to that overdriven signal. So I'm going to click on the plus button here to create a new send, and I'm going to create a new stereo bus. So you can either create something new, or you can send it to an existing bus. So in this case, it's something new. We're going to name this one overdrive.
Now he doesn't mention
and
the surround
then
bus.
what's going to happen is I'm going to add
Not a lot of
effect
use for
in
it.
there, an audio effect, and I'm going to choose the one we did earlier, TH3. We'll insert that in there, and then I'll just, once it's loaded up, select the preset, which is routing, which is what I used earlier, and then we'll close that. Now let's see what's happening here. What actually happens is the signal makes its way down the chain, and it branches off here over to the bus here, which is the overdrive bus which we've created. What I mean by branching off? Well, it goes off to that bus, but it also continues on down through the rest of the channel, all the way down through to the output. So you end up with two simultaneous signals happening. We'll just have a quick listen to it.
This is the side chaining that they're always talking
now,
about.
if I mute this bus and I play it again,
exactly, side
you
chaining
can still hear that guitar coming through its actual channel there. So the dry signal of the guitar continues on down through to the bottom and goes, of course, through to the master bus as it did earlier. But it's also branches off, it splits in two and goes to this bus over here, which of course has the overdrive effect on it. So let's add another bus in there. We'll create another send here. We'll do a new stereo bus. See, another one appears. We're going to call this one, we'll call it delay. Okay. So you may have guessed what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go to the effects section. I'm going to insert an audio effect, and then I'm going to go to Cakewalk, goes to Sonatus, delays, brings up my trusty old delay, and I'll choose this preset which I've set up for routing.
I would have been
okay, let's have
one.
a quick listen to that.
Yeah.
Oh,
the sound of
beg
this
your
is
pardon.
okay.
We'll listen again. I'll
it's
unmute
not my
the
preferred delay.
TH3 plugin. Let's have a listen to that. Take two. Okay, so what you heard was one very overdriven signal and then a whole bunch of delays which had no overdrive on them whatsoever. And that is because the dry signal branched off from the overdrive here, went up to the overdrive bus where it's overdriven. But that dry signal then continued to the delay down here.
He can send from one bus to another.
To the
I bet
delay.
you that's what he's going to do.
So
yeah.
with the effects sends here, or sorry, I should say the bus sends here in your channel, they're not working in sequence. They're branching off, but they're all receiving the original signal.
Because they're giving the signal to two different effects.
So
rather than routing them
that's
the way he
a
did.
big consideration when
And you
we're
can actually see
talking
the send
about
area
buses, and
on the
important
buses,
to
too.
understand.
Yeah,
So just to
hiding
recap,
right under the effects.
it branches off to the overdrive, but continues down through the chain. It branches off again to the delay, but it continues down through the panning and fader and goes through to its output, which is the master bus there. Now, that's a very odd sort of example of use. So in the next section, we're going to talk about some more typical examples of why you might use buses. Okay, so I have a very simple track set up here. In fact, it's a work in progress, a song that I'm working on at the moment, and it's got a couple of guitars in it, a Martin guitar and a Taylor guitar. Now, they're not real guitars, they're actually virtual guitars. They're Ample Sound guitars. I'll show you what I'm using. First of all, I'm
Ample's
using
got
this
some
Martin
great
guitar
sounds.
from Ample Sound here, and then
Nice.
I'm also using this Taylor. So if we
Yeah, I
listen
like
to the
that plugin.
Martin first, I'll just mute the Taylor. It sounds like this. And then if we mix it with the Taylor, they sound like this together. Okay, cool. So what if I think I want to add some reverb to the Martin guitar? I've already sort of jumped the gun here and done it. I may think, oh, I'll just chuck a reverb here in the effects section as an insert. And that's what lots of beginners will do without thinking about it too much, and they'll get their reverb. Great. And just for demonstration purposes,
What I
I'm
did at
adding a
first.
lot there, aren't I? That's actually cavernous, makes it sound like it's in a massive cathedral or something. Probably not what I would do in the actual song, but good for demonstration purposes. Okay, so then we've got the Taylor guitar, and we think, oh, we want the same kind of effect because they exist in the same space here. So we would do the same thing.
Now
and we
do
would
that on
insert,
5 tracks,
that effect
and it
here
becomes
for
a
the Taylor
mess.
guitar. Now, what I'm actually going to do is drag this one across while I hold Control on my keyboard. It just makes a copy of it there. Didn't know that one, did you? Now, we've got two of the same reverb happening, and they're both big, and they're on these guitars, and they sound like this.
Oh, damn, he's good. I didn't know that.
Now, the problem I have is if I think, well, that's just too big, and
That's why I
imagine
like
I've done
'em.
this for several instruments because I've put several through, and I think, well, that reverb's just too big, then I've got to go through to each of these plugins and change the settings on each of the plugins, and it's going to be very, very tedious, not very convenient,
Yeah,
and
and
it
this is
also
also
uses
why
up
you don't wanna-
unnecessary
you wanna centralize
resources
this.
on the computer. So this is the first
yeah,
reason
eats a
why you
computer up.
may use sends, because you can share plugins between different instruments or tracks. So I'm going to take that sonatus reverb and I'm just going to drag it all
And
the way across
that's
to this
when you get
bus
your
I've
glue.
created over here, which
Sound
is called
glue
reverb, and
comes
I'll just
from
delete it
shared
from this
settings.
Martin guitar here. So instead of having them on the
Drag it
effects
right to the
section,
bus.
I'm going to use send. So for the Martin, I'll add a send and I'll send it through to my
That is
reverb
useful
bus,
to
which I've
know.
already created, and I'll do the same for the Taylor. Cool. Now, if I play that, and I think, you know what? There's way too much
You wanna pull
reverb
back
there.
the
I can
signal
actually
a
just
little.
use this fader here to tone it down.
At the bus level, and you can also
Blend
do
it
it at
in.
the send level. That's why I love the combination, because I really adjust at both sides.
Yeah.
So that's really great. And the other thing, of course, I've still got is some individual control, because I can control the level that I send through. So if I want lots of reverb, for example, to be on the extra
And
guitar, the Taylor, but not so much on the
that's the key to
initial
using
one,
airy.
the Martin, then I can just drag it down
When you're
here
bussing airy,
and have a
you
listen
gotta
to that.
pull it back.
Yep. You just want that little taste.
And listen to the effect it has on those guitars.
Okay,
Like,
so that's
it's
one
gentle.
use or one good reason to use a bus for effects. Now, the other good reason is that you can chain effects together in a single bus. And reverb is
Yes.
a really good example of this. I'm just going to switch it off from the Taylor there. I'll just turn it off and I'll actually mute the Taylor guitar. So we're just listening
or his
to
earlier
the Martin
example,
guitar.
the
So listen again.
combination of the delay and overdrive.
Now, reverb is classic for making
Bus
things
routing.
muddy down the bottom end, because it's, of course, it's affecting that whole signal. So what I would do in this case is in fact insert some sort of EQ before the reverb. So I'm going to insert, let's have a look. We'll use Fab Filter, Pro Q3, as I usually do. And what I'm going to do here
and it's
is
much
just
easier to
get
clean
rid of all the bottom
a lot of
end
this EQ
this
stuff at the
signal
bus
here
side than
using,
on the individual tracks.
we'll use the cut there, and we'll just drag it all the way up there. So what's happening now is we're going through from the actual guitar. I'll just try to
Hey, he's
reduce this
using
for a second.
Greg's.
I can't remember how to do
Yep,
it.
he's using Fab
He's using
Filter.
Pro Q. Yeah.
So we're
yeah, I'm
going
gonna have to
through
check
from
this
the
out.
guitar, and it's hitting this, in fact, I'll change the order here. It's hitting the EQ first, where we're getting rid of all the bottom end, the bass end, and then we're only sending through the top end to the EQ. This is a good example of cleaning the reverb up. Let's have a listen.
And I love the visual where it shows you how much of it it's cutting
Oh,
out.
yeah.
Turn the EQ off.
This is right there with the guys who do Nectar. This looks like the same company.
You can hear all that bottom
think
end
it is.
muddiness there. So that's just one example of when we may chain effects together. How would we have done that if we hadn't used a send, if we'd tried to do this in the effects section over here? Well, let's have a look. We'll drag that over there, and we'll drag that reverb back over there. So the whole thing is happening now in this effects or insert section. Nothing's being sent over to the bus. Let's have a listen. That EQ has affected the whole sound of our guitar and thinned it out. We're not just adding it in just before the reverb. We're actually affecting the whole signal. So it's only possible
see
really
why I
to
never
do
went
this
back
if we actually use
the
a bus. So
track
that's one of the
method
very,
once
very
I
good
did it in the
reasons
bus.
to use a bus. Now, a very, very important
it is the
consideration
ultimate
when you're using sends in Cakewalk or indeed any other DAW is a button which is often ignored, and you'll see here it's called the post button, and it's switched on at the moment to post fader, and it can be switched off. Now, this has an important effect on our routing at times, so let's quickly look through what it means. In a basic sense, what it means is the signal being sent through to the bus being affected by the fader or not? If we are set to have that off, then the signal is not affected by the fader, and if it's switched on, then the signal going through to the bus is affected by the fader. So why does this matter to us at all? Well, I'm going to use one example of why it matters, and that should hopefully explain the way you need to think about these things. I have a very simple example here of some parallel compression, and I've put it on some vocals in the same song we were working on a moment ago. So what is parallel compression? Don't worry too much about that. I'm going to give you a very 30-second crash course. What happens with parallel compression is we send this vocal in this example through to this bus here where we have a compressor. It doesn't matter which compressor. I'm using this one. In this case, it's T-Rex one, but it could be any compressor. And what happens with parallel compression is we generally really compress it very hard, very heavily, to a point where by itself it does sound pretty terrible. If I just actually mute or just solo the compressor, in fact, and I'll play this vocal here with the fader up.
Trying to do that club trance sound.
Of all the things we could get right, we taught each other how to fight.
You can hear that that's a very compressed signal indeed. And that doesn't matter for parallel compression, because what we actually do is we use the original signal of the vocal and then we blend in that highly compressed version, and that helps us to keep whatever it is we're compressing present. So I'll put it down here. Someone will have a listen to that vocal now.
Of all the things we could get right, we taught each other how to fight.
And that's very ballpark kind of okay. Now, of course, we have two things going on here. The original vocal, which continues down through the chain, as we
really
discussed
brought
before,
that bus back,
and then we have this bus.
Yep.
Now, if we use this fader at all, which we probably will do on a vocal to keep it, to sort of adjust the mix with automation as we go along, because we're using that fader, we're going to affect the amount of signal which is sent through to that compressor. If I play it and then bring it down, you'll see that the signal disappears as I bring it down over here.
Of all the things we could
Oh, so when
So
you
not
turn
only-
the post off,
Not only have I lowered the
it's
vocal there
always
down to
going.
nothing, I've actually affected the amount of signal which is going through to the compressor. That means that it's being compressed.
And this is how I
less
normally
and
work.
Less
With that
because
light off, you're
compressors
basically
need a
just running
certain
99.9
level
all the
of
time.
signal before
Yeah,
they
yeah,
kick in, before they hit
99.9%.
their
This is how I
threshold.
normally work.
And we may not want that to happen. We may want it to continue to compress.
I now
that signal,
understand.
even though we're lowering the main signal. So in that case,
Why
we
I
would
would
switch
want to
this
turn that
button
off
over
once in a blue moon.
so that the signal now,
That's
it's got
useful.
the post off, which means that the signal is going through at this level we've set
It's
here
useful to know
through
that
to
option.
the compressor, regardless
know
of
I
what's
had that
happening
option.
with the
A lot of people see
fader.
that button as the
So,
on off for the actual effect.
if
but
we
it's not.
play it again, I'm
You
going to
hear the
drag this
effect of
fader
it
down,
when
but
you
you
do
will
it
see over here that there's
if you're
still
messing
signal
with the
going through
levels.
to the compressor.
All the things we could get right, we taught each other how to
Awesome that he
So
explained
that's
that.
really the importance
been one of those
that particular
anomalies for
function
me,
there,
that
and
button.
it's an important consideration. You can really come unstuck sometimes, especially when you're using automation. Now,
It's good to know the option.
just going to go on to a slightly new problem here, but
really
it's worth
good to know
talking
the
about
option.
here in terms of routing. The problem we've got with this particular example is these two things are in balance with each other. We've got a kind of a mix between the two of the vocal at a certain level and then the compression. And although when we reduce that vocal, we still want to compress it at the same sort of rate, if you like, we may actually want to lower its initial or its original, its eventual output. We want to keep them in balance with each other. I'm going to quickly show you how I would do that. I would create a new bus over here. We will call this, what we're going to call this bus, we'll just call it Vox, just for giggles. Now, from the output of Susie's vocals here, we're going to set that to Vox. So it goes all the way through to this new channel. And then we're going to take that compressed channel there and we're going to set its output to Vox. So they're both
there you
going
go.
through
Bus
eventually
routing.
to this bus.
Yep.
That means we can then use
Serial
this
bus.
new bus
And
to affect
this is
the whole level
what
of the
I've started
vocal,
doing when I
and
do
keeping that
vocals.
mix, that
Vocal
balance
mixing
between the vocal and the compressed vocal the
much
same. So now we can
useful this way.
do that.
all the things we could get right.
Yeah.
We taught each other how to fight and turn a heart into a stone.
And it's so awesome to have that flexibility.
So I hope that's clear. You
Yep.
may need to rewind that a little bit and watch it again if I didn't explain it that clearly. But it's a really important
Oh,
thing,
he
and it's
did
another reason
fantastic.
why we may create buses to group things together. And just on that final note, that's what I'm going to talk about next. So another reason to create buses is to create kind of little sub mixes of items within your mix. What can happen is as you add more and more instruments, things can get kind of out of control and difficult to mix. So it's good to create little
This is
sub
where
mixes.
you
So
can
let's look at
isolate
some
groups.
examples here.
Yep.
I'm going to look at
All
this
the
one
guitars
here. It's
on a
called, the
bus.
first track here is called
Yes.
Mike, that's me, and the other one's called Mike Harmony. These are two different takes on different tracks, but they actually sonically want to kind of sound the same. And now that I've got a balance between them, you can see the second one is slightly down on the fader there. I just want to treat them as one voice, if you like. So what I'm going to do is create a new bus over here, a stereo bus. I'm going to name it Mike Vox. And then I'm going to set its output at the bottom of the track for the first one to Mike Vox. And I'm going to set the second one to Mike Vox. And I'm going to change the color of it over here, just at the bottom on the right hand side. You can still see it a bit. Let's change it to, what do I fancy for me? Green. Green for go. It's a positive. And you can
Oh,
see
man,
that whenever
he's been
you send
angified.
outputs to a
Yes,
bus,
he
if
has.
you recolor that bus, it also recolors those tracks as well, which is kind of handy because you can see what they're linked to. Let's move on. There's also another couple of tracks here from Susie and Susie Harmony, and I've also set up a balance for those. So again, I'm going to set a new stereo bus up. I'll just drag all this over so you can see it a bit more clearly.
It's funny. Susie sounds like Angie
And
Plant.
I'm
when
gonna
she
call
sings.
that one,
that track that you
Susie.
showed me yesterday.
Exactly.
Susie Vox. And you've guessed it, I'm going to send the output of that, of Susie's first vocal and her second vocal, which is a harmony vocal, through to Susie Vox, and I'll recolor that. And I'll make it, I was going to make it kind of pink, but that's a bit stereotypical, isn't it? So let's go blue instead. Now, I could continue on. I've got a couple of guitars there. I could group those together, and then I've got a bass guitar, which I probably wouldn't group, and then I've got a couple of pianos. And what's going to end up then is I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of sub mixes over here. I'm probably going to end up with, say, 4 or 5 tracks rather than the 9 tracks I had originally. And then I can do my kind of major mixing over there. Lots less faders to deal with and lots of shared resources. That means that when you start EQing things, or when you start adding reverb
if I want
to
make
things
stems,
and all those things, you can sort of treat them as a group. Of course, if you need to treat them separately,
I might start
it's not
doing
a good idea
this.
to send them their outputs through to the same bus if you want to have sort of different effects.
You can
in their
export
chain.
a file
So that's another really good reason to
like
create buses. Now, another type of channel that we can route to in Cakewalk is an aux channel or auxiliary channel. And I'm going to demonstrate this using the bass guitar in my little song. I've got this bass guitar here, which is another Ample sound plugin. I'll just pull it up there. This is the Ample Bass P Precision Bass Guitar plugin. It sounds like this.
Into Zoom.
And that's the dry sound. I haven't got any amp on there at all. And in fact, that's what I want to do. I want to send this through to an amp sim. So the way I'm going to do it differently this time is I'm going to go down to Sends. And rather than select new stereo bus, I'm going to select a new aux track, and I'll click that. And you'll notice that unlike a bus, which appears all over on the right hand side, if I drag that over, it will normally appear next to the master bus there. Instead, this has appeared right next to our bass guitar there as a new track, and we'll get onto the importance of that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is add an effect in there. I'll insert an audio effect. And I'll go down to Overloud TH3 here, and we'll insert this effect, which we used earlier. And I've got a preset set up.
My go-to.
One there. And this is a bass amplifier set up there. So I've now got it going through to this track, which is handily right over here next to the bass guitar. And it's as if I'd recorded it in the studio and I'd put a mic on the
routing
amplifier or on the speaker cabinet itself. And now I can now blend those two signals together.
It's like a bus.
So I think that's a really interesting. It's a way I like to do that. It's something I often do with bass guitar signals as well, whether they're virtual basses or real bass guitars. And you'll notice one important thing about this, which is quite different to a bus.
I wish Greg was here.
Is that
this
you
is
do
a way of
have the
him doing his
ability
parallel
to record
technique.
these channels. So I could record, enable this, and hit the record button up there, and the signal coming through to it would be recorded to that channel permanently. So that's quite an interesting feature that you may want to use, but in this case I'm just going to use it in a similar way to a bus, but handily it's over there next to the bass guitar. And now I'm going to look at the last type of routing which we do in Cakewalk, which is using patch points. So the last example of routing which I'm going to talk about is patch points.
And you know,
now patch points are a strange thing for me because I know how they work and I know how they're different to auxiliaries
this is more
and
typical
buses,
over there.
but I haven't quite figured out how I would use them yet. So I'm going to leave it for you to tell me down in the comments how you would use patch points. But first of all, I'm going to explain how they actually work and what makes them different. So let's start off with this piano over here. I'll just give it a quick listen. It's sort of midway
plugging the cables in to route the call.
Sure.
Okay, so fairly straightforward. So what I'm going to do is an effects send here. I'm going to create a, rather than a new stereo bus or a new auxiliary, I'm going to create a new patch point. So I'll click that and you'll see nothing's happened. No new channel has happened. Patch points are a kind of internal routing, or that's the way they're described by Cakewalk. And in order to get any sort of use out of them, we actually need to create a new audio track here. So I'll insert an audio track. And you'll see I've got a new audio track there. I'm going to make the input for this audio track the patch point. So we can go over here. Here's the patch point we just created when we created the send.
And now
we're
you
going to
can
go over
see
and we're going to
like
select
something
the
to send
stereo
to.
signal from that patch point. So we'll do that there. And in fact, I'm just going to go back in there again because there's an option to rename it. So I'm just going to call it.
It seems redundant though. The reason why I don't use things like that in the auxiliary is it feels redundant. Like you're making another track to.
So we've got that there. Now, if I play the piano,
on the auxiliary,
I
can understand
through to that as a
if you're doing the
send.
bass like Greg, that auxiliary approach is.
Kind of depends on how you want to do side chaining. And
so far, it's
too.
very, very similar, if not identical, to an auxiliary, right? But a little bit more trouble, perhaps. Well, here's where things get a little bit interesting because...
Yes, that's what it feels like.
I'll just drag this around. If we make another auxiliary, another audio track here, which I'll drag across. In fact, let's make another one. And even another one.
What's he doing? What's he doing?
Maybe ahead of me here. Let's make the input for each of these. In fact, just for giggles,
one to the next, the next,
the left channel on that one.
Yeah. He's showing.
Let's do the right channel on that.
He's showing an
extreme
example.
And what you can see here, from just this one send, we're sending it off to 4 different channels.
Wow, that has some possible.
Now, of course, we could send other instruments through to any one of those channels if we wanted to. So, if we created a patch here on this, we'll send it to the piano patch. This guitar, we'll unmute it. Now, the guitar is going to also go through to all of those 4 channels. Okay,
I understand.
So that's how it works. That's something you couldn't, or you could do it with auxiliaries or buses, but you'd just be doing it in a different way. So I've pondered over this. So I do a lot of pondering, you know, and that's how it works. But I've never really found a use for it in my project. So do let me know if you think there's a really good use case for this in the comments down below. And hey, you could help to improve my work.
If he finds
so I do
one,
hope
I
this video has been useful to you. Now, it's quite possible that you may do things in a slightly different way. Maybe.
I actually have a slight or a thought to that.
He really is awesome with those hidden gems. Like, it's true. For all that I know about Cakewalk, I learned at least 5 cool things out of that one video that are going to be useful for me tomorrow.
Little nuggets. One thing
even on the bus logic, like he showed me a couple that post button description. I've been trying to understand the usefulness for it, where I could utilize it. And if you are automating the levels on a track, but you still want to send the signal consistently to the bus, knowing that option is there, it gives me that 1% time when I might use it.
My thought for the that last bit he was going on is being able to send to those different channels is, let's say that you had some vocals and you wanted to, like, let's say it was 3 vocals and each, you know, had backgrounds or whatever, but you wanted to have a mix of the first and the second over here, a mix of the first and the third over here, and a mix of the second and third over there, and a mix of all 3 over here. So different parts of the song, like these 2 are together. So you'd be able to bring, with automation, you could bring this one up and bring that one down. And that way you'd be bringing up these 2 together or those 2 together, but you know, doing them in groupings like that.
And if you want that automation to have the effect on the effect bus, if I don't want that automation to affect the delay or the reverb, then what I'm doing to the signal don't change what I'm pushing to the processor. Very useful to have the switch, because they don't explain it in the Cakewalk documentation. I looked through it to try to get a good explanation for that, but he gave a good use case.
Exactly, good examples and use cases, especially for the one with the delay and the TH3 with the distortion, or the overdrive, I should say, where you see them in the one order, you see how the distortion or the overdrive kind of tapers off. And that was the other thing about that one, was if you were trying to find a particular sound for the guitar, like how much overdrive you wanted, if you had it on too much and then you strike that first note, as you hear the decay, you can say, okay, it was after like the 3rd bounce, that's where it sounded about right where I wanted it. So I want to bring it down by, you know, 20% or 30%. Like, you figure out where in the power you want to go to get that sound you want with that amount of overdrive.
And that auxiliary option, really, I can see Greg doing his parallel bass solution,
Right.
utilizing that. Auxiliary is something that I always knew would be useful to me if I want to route somewheres, like to Zoom or make a virtual patch bay. You can push what you're playing to a special track just so that you have a way to push it to another program. And that's how you move ASO to the rest of the audio that's going on in your computer. I could see that auxiliary choice being a useful choice for some of the stuff I do, for what Greg's trying to accomplish with his bass dual signal processing. The patch approach, I'm with him. Like, it seems redundant. It feels like an auxiliary. I do see the additional, like, wow, I can make 10 tracks and use the patch approach to just keep pushing the signal, pushing the signal. But what are you trying to accomplish by making those extra signals? I don't
Well,
want to make more signals unless I want to do something weird with them, like hard pan them.
one of the other things we talked about at one point was more than 3 effects. Like if you had a particular guitar, for example, and you wanted to put on 6 or 9 effects, let's say, on the guitar as opposed to just 3, like rather than having,
You're a mad cracker.
yeah,
A
if you're doing stuff like that,
maniac. Like,
me, I try to minimize, right? Like I try to have as little as possible going on. But in a case
yeah,
scenario where you wanted to have that many, then you can only really see 3 on that channel strip at a time, right? Without having to scroll up or down. So I could see the case for using those sends to say, okay, I've got these 3
okay.
on this one, these 3 on that one, these 3 on
Ah,
this one, so that I can see
yes.
visually what all's going on. And you
Leave
can
it
even
to
mix
you to
those
think
effects
out
in
of
or
the
out.
box. You just gave me the reason why I would want to do it, because yes, I would want to see all those effects, and if I can't see it in my rack because my screen doesn't let me, that's a useful way for me to power, turn this on and off while I'm mixing. That's what I want to be able to do.
And you could also automate, bringing those effects in or out. Like if these first couple were the reverb effects, and the second couple are this delay that you only want in this one part of the song, and
Yeah.
this other part is something else. Like you can use the automation again in those sections to bring those aspects up or down.
The easiest way to do automation is on off. If the automation is like flip it on, flip it off, it's very easy to program that in. Automation gets more tricky when you're trying to slide and you want something to go down and fade. That's when your automation takes a little work. But if it's turning on an effects or turning it off, it's like being a guitarist with that snap box.
Use engage.
Hmm. And then make sure it's recording, like the
Yeah,
automation.
exactly. Good
Well,
stuff though. Creative Sauce definitely always has good stuff for us.
exactly. Like every single video I've ever watched, I came away from it a better Cakewalk user after. And I've
Yeah.
done so much shit at this point with Cakewalk, but he continues to show me like I ain't seen nothing yet.
Yep. And just finding out those little tips and tricks, things that other people have tried, and like that little control, drag it from here to there, and you can copy it. It's like, that makes a whole lot of sense. And there's places where that would, where it would come from, and reasons why people would try that. But there's also no reason why somebody would be expected to try that necessarily without knowing that that's a way to do it.
Yeah, that tip video last week has saved me at least like 4 or 5 hours since
Already.
seeing it
Nice.
in the last week with everything that I do the way I do it. So,
Streamlining.
and now with the busing, I was actually thinking as I was watching it about a couple of different ways to approach. People have asked me to put stems up of, my tracks, and I would love to put the stems up or even the individual tracks, but it's a lot of work to break up drums, guitars, plus the way I tend to mix. I'll play strings on a guitar part. So how do I stem that? If somebody wants to just hear like the guitars, I really do need a solution. And his bus approach, it's true. If I was to actually build a bus for each stem and set up my tracks, when I go to export, I could export to a bus and say, boom, there are the actual guitars.
Yep.
And that's a WAV file. I think in the future, I might update my version 3s to include those pieces.
Because a lot of times when your projects are almost always going to be more than 16 tracks. So you always have to do some mixing down anyway, but if you're going to bring it to BandLab.
My
So
projects start with 16 tracks from MIDI. The
Right.
MIDI takes 16 tracks.
But
After
once you do
that,
those,
I have to make audio tracks,
when you
double,
decide
triple
which
that.
way, when you decide which way to make the stems, like I've seen ones that you've done where you have like the no vocal one or the vocal one, the one that has something in a melody line or someone that doesn't. Similarly, you could have something that has a bass line or doesn't have a bass line. But like
Yeah.
if you just took a couple of those binary options and you made your BandLab project to be, those 8 outputs or 6 outputs or whatever it is, so
See,
that
now,
people have those options to flip on or
I've
off.
done that. I've done that on request a lot of
Right.
times. Like I've had drummers, Easy Drummer, great fucking BandLab drummer. He's wanted to do drums on some of the tracks, so I've had to like strip those out and keep everything else. And then afterwards, sometimes they're like, "Oh, can you remove the guitars? Because now Ice wants to come in and play a part." And sometimes I will make those after the fact.
And that
But
by using the busing,
if I start making the buses now,
yeah, then
like,
you can just like mute
when
the drum
somebody
bus.
does want it, I literally will just be able to click export and push it to that bus, and it's already grouped. It's a
Right.
quick grouping approach.
Very cool.
Yeah, those were great tips. That was I think the most informative video we've seen so far on the bus mixing. I'm a big advocate of his logic there.
Well,
Yeah, I
I
know it's a-
missed a bunch of that, so you guys are gonna have to help me and show me.
Oh, and we've got it recorded, so we'll
Oh, yeah.
we'll be going over some of that stuff for sure in the future. People who do want to start like learning how to mix over in Cakewalk or whichever DAW, the approach, the technique that he's talking about spans any DAW. Bus mixing is a better way to digitally mix because of its flexibility.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. I was listening on the way home about all that and everything, the track recording, and it's all a bunch of useful knowledge. I'm gonna need it here shortly. I've got a lot of ideas in mind, and I think it'll be useful, especially using those bus channels and.
Well, he actually he had a couple of approaches that might help you with your the way you're doing your bass. The auxiliary approach that he suggests could take care of your parallel sound that you want. You want to get the deep bass tones, but you also want to get a punchy pluck on top of it. And his auxiliary suggestion might be a way for you to do it on one track, but that one track runs the parallax on the auxiliary and solves some of your parallel sound that you're trying to accomplish.
Right, and I think part of the issue that I'm running into recording my stuff is because I run both channels basically the same in the parallax. I think I have clashing sound waves, low sound waves between the two of them. So I'm trying to filter those out and see which one to drop lower or bring higher.
And some of that comes from the order of the effects chain and what's being sent to those signals at the same time. Being able to adjust the signal at the like bus or auxiliary level and how much is being sent might get rid of some of that clashing. Usually with sound that clashes, it's because you have multiple reverbs.
See, and I don't use any reverb
all
on
settings. If you have multiple tracks running through their own processors, delay, reverb, any general effect, they will start to clash against each other.
Right, you get clashing sound frequencies. They're low.
Mixing helps you to avoid that.
Right.
Yeah, by sending everything through the bus and putting the effect on the bus so that you can choose, so it's a unified effect and you're just deciding how much signal from each to put into that one output essentially.
And it gives you the most important thing in mixing, glue. You'll hear mixers and engineers constantly saying like glue, glue, glue. And it's well, I'm hearing you on the right side. We're back to the
only mono.
I can understand you.
Only mono.
You can bring up the volume.
I think it might just be
it's coming through my right side.
If you speak directly at the microphone, we might hear it in both. It might just be the angle at which your voice
I hate this microphone.
Oh, there.
That's
I hear it louder. That's better. Yeah,
that's all it was. It's just basically when you were talking originally, you were probably just
I figured this is one that I got to speak right into.
Yeah, no, it's working good now.
Even when you're back a little ways, it's fine. It was just that if you're too far
And-
back or if you're only coming in at one
you can
side,
hear
we
me.
don't hear it. Yeah, we can hear you.
And Ange is just asking, is it pumpkin time? Oh yes, Ange, it's always pumpkin time if you need.
I just seen that too.
Yep. We did run a little
I
over.
mean,
That
we're
was one
good.
of the longer videos, but
I'm here for a little while longer, but
Probably my bad.
We'll wrap this up as far as over on Band Lab. Awesome stuff tonight, Glenn. Like
Yep.
Most useful yet. And
Glad we had
after
some good
last
stuff to
week,
cover.
Thank you very much.
after last week's tips, this was actually even more useful. So Mike
build
is
on each
kicking
other.
ass over there. Yeah, I love what he's putting out.
And I want to say this video actually came out in 2020. So this was back from like in March of 2020. So it definitely had, good tips even from back then. And there have been new things
Yeah.
since then that he's
I
done.
haven't even seen what he's put out since the band lab integration. I want to see his take on all of that because he finds the nuggets of tricks.
Definitely.
I noticed
you'd
that.
think
I'm
he's
kind
a
of excited
programmer.
to use that Pro EQ.
Yeah. There's
Oh,
all the
yeah,
stuff that comes in with all there.
The Pro channel you are going to love.
And the TH3.
Oh, yeah.
We'll show you. Oh yeah, and the TH3. So we'll say goodnight to Band Lab. Great to have you guys tonight. Hope you learned as much as I did. And
Oh, absolutely.
stay tuned tomorrow as we figure it out Friday with Ange. And we're going to continue with
We're on
all
to
the
figure it out
F's.
Now he said figure out Friday.
I fucking got you.
Yep.
Hashtag.
Thank you all.
That definitely can use a hashtag at the end.
Talking.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
IT with Tony and Glenn. Till tomorrow night, you all. Good night.
Everyone.
Catch you all next time.